Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. We're going to be doing a show this evening on our reaction to, of course, Hulu's announcement that they are going to be what? Disseminating, releasing a Freaknik documentary entitled The Wildest Party Never Told. Before we get started, you all know we have to go through, of course, what? Some housekeeping, some ground rules here at Lumumba Speaks. So first and foremost, as always, diversity of thought is welcome. I don't care if you're on the left, you're on the right, or right down the middle. Diversity of thought is welcome. Number two, no racial epithets of any kind can be used. As you all know, this is a space of Black empowerment. So we believe wholeheartedly that the first core principle of Black power is what self-respect. So we want to respect ourselves as African people, and in doing so, we will not allow racial epithets of any kind to be used here on this channel, on my platform. Number three, facts over feelings. So if someone taps in, they're part of the conversation, and you disagree with them, we want you to attack the argument, and of course, not the person. So once again, facts over feelings, attack the argument, not the person, and of course, number four, no fundamentally false statements of any kind can be used. So you can provide your own opinion, but we want to make sure that if possible, you could undergird that, of course, with factual information. A great example would be if you had the belief that LeBron James is a better basketball player than Michael Jordan. That's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But if you were to claim that Michael Jordan never won an NBA championship, that would be a fundamentally false statement. So we want to stay away from fundamentally false statements. And then, of course, as you all know, here on Lumumba Speaks, our mission is neither to exonerate or vilify, but simply to challenge conventional wisdom and re-examine what has been previously accepted as fact. And so in doing so, we want to make sure I introduce, we have a featured guest that's going to be with us moving forward here on Lumumba Speaks. So I want to introduce the woman, the myth, the legend, that is the Afrocentric social worker, none other than Sister Monica Thomas. How are you doing today, Sister Monica?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. How are you?
No problem. I'm doing quite all right. Quite all right.
Good.
So we're looking at this Hulu documentary, right? So there's been a lot of public rancor in the community regarding the Hulu documentary. Some are arguing, where's the Girls Gone Wild documentary? Where's the Woodstock documentary? I've heard these conversations taking place. Where's the MTV Spring Break documentaries, right? And so many are arguing that this may be a way of trying to make the Black community look bad. So before we get this conversation started, I'm just going to pose that question to you and want to get your thoughts on, as the Afrocentric social worker, what are your thoughts on this issue of Hulu seeking to try to make the Black community look bad by promoting the Freaknik documentary as opposed to other documentaries that typically and where young people are engaging in what many will argue is what the same type of behavior.
Right. So I do believe, as always, it's important for us to kind of keep these things in a political, socioeconomic context and a
Mhm.
cultural context.
Right.
So in terms of where we are as a culture and where we are as a community, I think it's important for us, of course, to look at timing, like why now? Why would this information be disseminated? What's the purpose of it? What's the end goal? Like, is it just for education, or is it to push some type of
Agenda.
agenda, or to open up some type of conversation, or to create some discourse in the community? So, I mean, I do believe we have to consider all of those factors as to why this is happening. Now, in terms of Hulu releasing it, from what I was able to find, you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is something where Jermaine Dupri is behind this. So
Mhm.
I don't know if they approach Hulu or if Hulu approached them. So if this is something that we're driving, then I don't know that we could say that Hulu would take the fault for necessarily take the fall. I think that they'll play a role in this to the degree to where they see that it'll make money, or that it'll cause people to um subscribe or get more subscriptions onto their platform. So where they see the financial benefit of it, I think they will be fine with it. Now, to the detriment that we create this conversation within our own community, I
Mhm.
don't think they will have a problem. That's why there would be no Woodstock. That's why, there would be no other documentary to follow, because I don't know that they will have a problem with us putting these narratives and creating this conversation within our community if they know that they could profit from it. There would be no negative thing that would come onto them for doing this, because this is what they do. They create documentaries, so they can always absolve themselves from responsibility because this is just the type of content that they create.
Right. And
So I would need to see who initiated it.
right. And I believe that you're correct from the research that I did, the reading I was able to engage in. I saw that Jermaine Dupri was one of the primary factors or forces behind releasing the documentary. But with that being said, many people may be unaware of the history and the origins of the Freaknik. So I want to know if you could share that with the viewing audience.
Sure. So, I actually was in Atlanta. I was in high school actually when I first went to Atlanta for spring break. So I didn't know where it originated or how. I just knew that when I was in high school, it was a big thing. So, it originated on the campus of Spelman. So
Okay.
there was a group, I think it was called the DC Club or
Yes.
something.
Yes.
I have to get the name of it. Where they wanted to have a way for college students who couldn't afford to go home for spring break. They wanted to create an opportunity for them to have something to do, to create some camaraderie between the HBCUs in Atlanta.
And
So this,
if I
oh,
could, just
go
very
ahead.
quickly interject. So for those of you who do not know, when Sister Thomas is talking about the DC Club, this is a group of Spelman University, Spelman College students who are from
Yeah.
Washington, D.C., also known as the district, also known as Chocolate City, who were students at Spelman who could not afford to go home on spring break. So they wanted to create some type of event to where they could gather and have camaraderie, similar to what we find many students doing. Maybe if they aren't able to go home doing what is known as Thanksgiving, right?
Right.
Students come together, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to make that clear to the audience, but go right ahead.
Yep. Thank you for that clarification. So, the original intent, it was a good idea. It was something that was designed to help the students. It was created by a student who was on campus. And for a long time, the original intent of it, it was doing what it was supposed to do. It was reaching the students that it was intended to reach. And then it grew bigger than what they had envisioned, what they had imagined. And it turned into something that the students on campus no longer controlled. So our outside promoting agency actually bought the rights to the name, because it was a mix of the word freak and picnic. So it was supposed to be those two words combined. It was actually a Spelman student who, from what I was able to find, originated the term. And she came up with the name of the event. Originally, Spelman didn't want to have anything to do with the event, and they tried to stop it and put an end to it, but it was becoming successful, so they continued to do the event. And then over time, when it was kind of Christopher Columbus from the group on Spelman's campus, then they lost control of it. A lot of people started to come down to the Atlanta area who weren't even in college, who weren't associated with an HBCU at all. And then it went from, I think it said 50,000 people who would come to about 300,000 people who would eventually start coming down to Atlanta. And then it just morphed into something that the business owners didn't like, the neighborhood associations wanted to put it into, Atlanta government officials wanted to shut it down. So it just wasn't a good look for the college. It wasn't a good look for the city.
And for those of you who don't know, when the Freaknik expanded, it really, many people argue that it took a turn for the worse in 1993, right? And they was having street parties, concerts. They even had a film festival. Many people may be unaware of that, but many argue that it took a turn for the worse in 1993 when Uncle Luke and the Two Live crew were invited.
Yeah.
So many people may know about Uncle Luke and me, so you know what, right? So many people argue that that's when the Freaknik took a turn for the worse. And when we talk about a turn for the worse, one of the things that many people don't think about, because we think of, matter of fact, when we were coming up in the 99 and 2000, Atlanta was the place to be, right? You throw it up for the A, right? You want to have a good time. This was almost like the new mecca of hip hop and R&B. However, what oftentimes isn't discussed when we talk about the Freaknik is that there was a large-scale number of sexual assaults that took place, particularly against women. And when we say women, we're talking about Black women. So I think this kind of, shows the danger of hookup culture, which we know was very prevalent amongst young adults and amongst college students, right? So I don't know if you could speak to that a bit.
So the sexual assault specifically that happens at on
Yeah,
college
no, the
campuses?
sexual assaults that took place during the Freaknik and the dangers of course, hookup culture. Because I know you have a
Yeah.
niece that's in college now, if I remember correctly. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So she went to Alabama, but she absolutely was a part of the college scene. So with that, you do have a lot of instances where sexual assault happens on college campuses, and oftentimes they go unreported,
Hmm.
because the oftentimes the students are scared to disclose what happened. They're fearful of being blamed or shamed, or being told that they caused it, or being questioned about what they wore or what did they do to create it or initiate it. So you do have a large degree of assaults that happen on campuses, but a lot of times females don't come forth to report it. So with that, you also have, when you mention hookup culture, you have this idea that, people just come together just to have sex, and then there's nothing more. There's no attachment, there's no connection, there's really nothing that you're building in terms of creating a relationship. So when you think about that, and then what was going on in the 90s with the way that our music was changing and the way that our culture was beginning to change, I think that just culminated into something that was, I mean, it just created the wild, wild west in Atlanta in terms of, we wanted to have something that was celebratory, but I don't know that the people who created it was ever intended to be at the detriment of Black women.
Right.
So, I'm very sad when I looked at the history of how it evolved, and the fact that sexual assault actually a part of what
Yeah.
was happening there. I could imagine the trauma that this could create, bringing this story back up, reliving some of those scenes. Not to say that, you know we shouldn't kind of go back and revisit this history, because I think it's important for us to do so, because they say, if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to repeat it. So
Right.
I do believe that it's important for us to kind of go back and analyze how we got here, what were all of those culminating factors, how did women become victimized in those situations, and what does this mean for the community as a whole. So I think we have to examine the entire thing.
Absolutely. I think those are some great points that you made. Um, and so this really leads to a cultural conversation. Is there something wrong with contemporary Black culture? Now, many people take umbrage with, of course, the Spelman College. Of course, it's named after Rockefeller's wife. Spelman tends to focus on teaching the young ladies respectability politics. There's a whole initiation where they're wearing white to represent purity and chastity, so on and so forth. And we understand that, but that's a conversation for another day, right? But this almost in my mind goes to this concept of disrespectability politics, to where I'm going to act in a manner that is so outlandish, so outrageous, extremely egregious in relation to social norms, as to try to deviate from the quote unquote norm or pressure of what policing ourselves due to the white gaze, right? And so I would make the argument. Of course, you went to college as well, and I'm sure you frequent at least a couple parties when you were in college, right? And I'm sure you would see some things. There would be fighting, people doing drugs. Is this contemporary Black culture?
Well, for me, my experience was a little bit different. So I
Okay,
went to
I got to put that on you. You go pull it back. Okay, gotcha. Okay,
yeah, so that wasn't my experience. I went to a private Christian college. Not to
okay,
say that people weren't partying, but I
right.
wasn't. I didn't attend any parties when I was in college. So it was a very conservative college that I went to, and this wasn't a part of my college experience. And that
Mm,
was part of the reason why when I was in high school, this was part of my college tour, how I was kind of evaluating where I wanted to go to school. So I do believe everybody's college experience is
yeah,
different,
yeah.
but I do think that when you think about college life, the parties and the fraternities and sororities, all of those things are actually a part of college life, and what it means to kind of be out on your own and to make new friends, and the whole college experience. I think that that's a part of it, and that can become very problematic, because if you don't reel it in, if you're not making good choices about the places where you go, if you're not super aware of the people who you're around, if you're hanging around with people who you really don't know well, if you have any inkling of low self-esteem where you're doing things that are not in alignment with your values or your
Mhm.
beliefs, all of those things can factor into, the decisions that you make and the situations that you find yourself in. And, when I say that, that's not in a way to demonize or victimize the people who were victims of assault. I think we have to honor the fact that, the perpetrator is the person who is at fault if someone is
Right.
victimized.
Absolutely.
So we definitely want to put the onus and responsibility where it lies. I do think that it's important for us also to be, because I think two things can be true at the same time. It's important for us to be mindful of where we are, who we're around, what we're doing, are we safe? But even sometimes with all of those things in place, you sometimes still can't protect yourself from people who are looking to victimize someone.
Right.
So I don't believe that this is necessarily a part of our culture. I believe that it is a part of college culture. I would
Mm,
say that
okay.
because I do think that's a huge part of the college experience. So I wouldn't think that
And,
it's
and just
anything
to be clear,
different that we're doing as Black people that doesn't happen at other college campuses. Oh, what'd you say?
and just to be clear, this is part of college experience that Sister Thomas did not experience, right? So just
Right.
clear. Real, very
Right.
quick, family, if you're watching, make sure you smash that like button. We're trying to get into the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you smash the like button, subscribe. Make sure you hit the notification bell. We're having a conversation regarding the Hulu documentary, that forthcoming documentary, Freaknik, The Wildest Party Never Told. The link is in the chat, is in the description. I would also put the link in the chat momentarily if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation. I'm here with the Afrocentric social worker, the only Afrocentric social worker that I know of. Of course, the woman, the myth, the legend, Monica Thomas. And so there have been 5 prominent women, including, from what I've read, a judge who is seeking to file an injunction to prevent the release of the documentary. The argument that they're making is that it was unlawful and that they did not sign media releases.
Yes.
Some would argue that is a bit of subterfuge, right? That they're simply trying to protect their personal brand. They don't want people seeing what they were doing 20, 30 years ago. So, and so very quickly, family, I'm going to share, there's a Freaknik Instagram page. Many people may be unaware of this. And as you can see here, if we scroll down, there's a picture here and it shows what? Guidance counselor, mayor, life coach, principal, pastor, FBI agent, Freaknik today leaders, yesterday's freakers, right? So we see that there's an argument or ongoing conversation in the community in which many are presuming that the reason why people are opposed to the documentary being released is because they don't want people seeing what they were about, that they were what they were doing in yesteryear. So, what are your thoughts on that, Sister Thomas?
Well, I think people should be allowed to evolve. I don't think that people, if that is who those people evolve to be, what would be wrong with them wanting to put their past behind? That's making the assumption that the person that they were in their 20s is the same person that they are in their 40s or 50s. I don't
Yeah.
think that that's a fair judgment that we can make. I don't think that it's an accurate assessment that we can make around people's characters. I think it's a way to villainize and demonize people for maybe things that they did in their past. But I mean, if no one typically is the same person that they were in their 20s that they are in their 40s. I believe that we should allow people the opportunity to evolve, but then I don't think that people should be ashamed of who they were and where they came from. I believe if this is your brand, it could be a part of your story if you want it to be. But
Right.
I don't think that this is something that you should be.
Mm-hmm. You froze up a little bit on me there. Hopefully, we could get you back.
Reality.
Right. And so I think that's a great point, right? Because I went to Mardi Gras when I was 18 years old. 18.
Okay.
So I don't have conversations about what took place and what transpired when I went to Mardi Gras. I was going up and down Bourbon Street from midnight to 5, 6 in the morning. Right. But I would presume, and as we know here in America, I would make the argument, I think you would agree, that America is a vehemently anti-Black country, right? And it tends to be, we know there's history and even contemporary examples, that the consequences for deviant behavior for Black people are far more detrimental than consequences for other groups of people, right? And so that, I think, is some of what is really, undergirding this push. Like, listen, I'm not white. I can't say, yeah, when I was in high school, I took my top off at a party and woo, I was drinking, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
VP of marketing. I'm a marketing executive. I'm XYZ. I'm CEO of XYZ, right? I have my personal brand. I'm running this office, and that may cause shareholders or individuals who are supporting my company to want to go in the opposite direction. Even though when I
Yeah.
did this, I was 19 years old, and now I'm 42.
Yeah, that's a fair point, because I do think, as we, especially for those of us who went to college or were kind of, I wouldn't say that I was pushed into college, but we were told that if we wanted better for ourselves, if we wanted to, um, have a good life, or have make a decent amount of money, that college was the way to go. College was the way to do it. And with that, we knew that we oftentimes had to work twice as hard to be half as good. So with that idea of us having to work twice as hard, of course, you wouldn't want someone digging up things from your past when you know the place to where you've gotten to now. If you do have any position of relevance, that relevance to you personally or professionally, where you are a VP or a CEO, you've worked to get there. It wasn't anything that was handed to you. Oftentimes there's no nepotism involved. There's typically no relationship that got you there, no single relationship that got you there in terms of a parent or someone on the board. We typically worked our way into those positions. So from someone who's there, maybe the idea that could be ripped from you because you're Black, yeah, that would be difficult. And I do believe that if no waiver was signed to release pictures and videos, I don't think that those people should have to succumb to whatever producers are saying that they have to do if they didn't go through the proper channels to get consent to show their pictures and videos.
Great point. Great point. Family, the link is now in the chat. I repeat, the link is in the chat. So if you want to tap in, be part of the conversation, we're discussing, of course, the Hulu forthcoming documentary, Freaknik, The Wildest Party Never Told. I will put myself out there. I never attended the Freaknik. However, I attended a similar event in Mississippi on the Gulf Coast known as Black Beach, right? And that's all I would say about that situation. This is when I was in the military. So I definitely could understand there being some trepidation on a lot of people's parts regarding, hey, I did some things when I was a young adult. Because, for example, I grew up in a very strict Pentecostal Christian household. So as you know, when I got out on my own, I felt like I had freedom. I'm free, right?
Yeah.
When you get a little older, you get to bring it back in a little bit. And so I can understand people's concern there. But family, the link is in the chat if you want to tap in and be part of the conversation. We'd love for you all to do so. We're talking about the Freaknik, the wildest party never told.
So I have a question for you about your perspective on the release of the documentary in terms of the perception of Black men in the documentary, or the portrayal of Black men. What are your thoughts about that?
Right. So there's a lot to unpack there, right? One, I think personally, my concern would be how is the story narrated, right? Is it one that promotes this issue of debauchery and ratchet culture, and we just get together and we just doing whatever for God knows how long, for whatever reason, wherever it's being done? But once again, we talk about the sexual assault. This automatically is going to shed a light of Black men being seen as sexual predators. Well, we're congenial in nature. We're born this way. We're going after women and we're trying to do them harm. So there's a lot there, right? And we all know what took place with R. Kelly, right? Where people tend to really go a little bit far, right? When it comes to sharing a narrative, and they kind of take liberties with the truth, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's an issue for me there as well, right? I can recall in my younger days, I remember I was working security at a party at Central State, and there were young teenage girls that I would dare say were probably my daughter's age, attending the party and dressed in a provocative manner. And I'm like, what in the bleep is going on? This is before I even had children. And so I can only imagine what could take place in that type of setting, right?
Yeah.
People being taken advantage of, individuals being manipulated, right? We all saw the episode of Fresh Prince where Ashley was at the frat party kissing on the linebacker, right? And Uncle Phil finds out. So there's a lot to unpack there. From that standpoint, I would almost want to say I don't want it to be released, right? But at the same time, what if releasing documentary creates a situation where individuals are being brought to justice, right? So I think there's a lot to unpack there. But I would dare say, oftentimes, whenever something's being disseminated about the Black community, the narrative isn't controlled by Black men, and that Black man is not Black-minded, and he's not a masculine Black male, because we have a lot of Black men who I would dare say are simps, right? Betas, right? Who are willing to go along with what castigating, demonizing their own image. Then I would dare say that, of course, it's going to be negative.
And to your point, when you say that there's a lot to unpack there, the disadvantage I think for us as African Americans, like, this can't just be like a Studio 54 kind of documentary where we just kind of look back and are nostalgic about the times. Like, when things like this are released about our culture, we take that internally to mean something about our representation to the world and our representation to whiteness. So we can't just, it's hard for us to just look at it as a documentary and say, wow, that's what happened, back in the 90s.
It's a good old block party, right?
Yeah, we don't just we don't typically detach ourselves from the things that happen to us culturally. It becomes a part of our cultural story and a part of our identity, something that either we have to distance ourselves from because of the way that it makes us look, or the way that we'll be perceived. Because I think a lot of Black people try so hard not to be perceived in those ways. It's kind of like, oh, here we go again. It's like, if there's a representation that happens in the public eye, we take that to mean something about how we show up in the world and how we have to kind of protect ourselves from those stories. So I think that's another part that's important, that I don't know that other cultures do that when information, they don't feel the need to protect themselves or to distance themselves from certain things. It's just something that happened in the past or was just an event. But for us, it becomes a part of our identity.
Right. And I think that's the stigma of Blackness in America, right? That irrespective of what story is being told, that negative aspects are always what? Connected to Blackness, Black identity, Black culture, and our way of being and showing up in the world, right? And it's unfortunate, right? But this is what tends to happen when you are a minority and you're living in a dominant culture, but of course, it's antithetical to, of course, your best interest, right? What do you say to some? And there are some conservatives out there that argue that Atlanta is the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, right? We know about this because we have a Christian background, what Sodom and Gomorrah means, right? And make the argument that whatever negative events took place as a result of someone living in sin.
Well, even though I come from a Christian background, some of the ideas that are associated with that ideology, I don't believe. I oftentimes hear people say that we're cursed. I don't believe that we're cursed. I don't believe that Atlanta is the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah. Because I think in a place where there exists a lot of bad, there also exists a lot of good. I think there's a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation that happens in Atlanta. I think that's a place where typically Black people go to do fairly well for themselves. So I wouldn't put it in a box, to say that they're going to be destroyed or, that, that's a place kind of where sin resides. I think wherever bad people are and they do bad things, you'll get the end result of what happens from that: violence, assault, any negative outcome that you can think of. I wouldn't label Atlanta to be this magical place where, they align with all of these ideas from the Bible. I wouldn't believe that.
Right. And of course, I just wanted to put that out there. Of course, both of us having a Christian background. And sometimes when I talk to my parents about these issues, I kind of have to be like, all right, I'm just going to let them slide with this one and try to redirect the conversation, right? So there's something just to consider. But as we do know, in 2019, Peace, Brother Bawana, hope you could tap in, brother. Says, afternoon, guys, appreciate you. It was revamped. We know Freaknik came back. They had Uncle Luke once again, Juvenile, back that thing up. Trina, I'm the baddest. Who's bad? Right? All those songs. And I don't know if you were a hip hop head, but of course I am. When I was really into the culture when I was in high school, got me in a lot of trouble. I was just having a good old time, right? But is there something to say about hip hop culture? That hip hop culture or rap culture, I would argue that there's a difference, brings about this type of negative and nefarious type of behavior and environment. Good example, I'm quite sure you're familiar with Ricky Poole, Natural Foods Plus, right? And he used to run, this of course was before our time, a nightclub out in Jefferson Township, Route 4 in the 70s. And he argued that, hey, I only had to have one security guard. After the advent of rap culture, hip hop, he had to have 6 security guards. There were shootings all the time. He had to shut the place down. So there's even an argument that the music is having a negative effect on the culture, and that is leading to this type of degenerate behavior.
And, so go ahead.
You got it.
So I believe that just as there is a process of evolution, meaning you can kind of go from where you are, move to higher levels, that there's also a process of devolution where you're moving in the opposite, where you're devolving, where you're not really coming into higher levels of knowledge, where things are regressing, where your intellect is regressing, your capital, your capacity, your population, all of those things trend down as well, just like things can trend up. And I do believe when we made, I'm not into hip hop at all, so I'm never one who likes to speak on the culture. I appreciate the culture, and
so let me
I
say
recognize
this.
Let
me say this very quickly. So for all the viewers, so there are 5 aspects of hip hop culture, right? One is DJing, right? Skip it, right? MCing, you know, you going on the mic. A third aspect is b-boying and b-girling, right? So these are the people who could break, battle, so on and so forth. My daughter at one point was crazy about being a b-girl. The fourth is clothing. Then the fifth, of course, is graffiti. Hip hop. She's not a hip hop head, professor. I got you, right? So there are 5 aspects of hip hop culture, right? Now, KRS-One, you may be familiar with KRS-One. He was, of course, Boogie Down Productions. He stated that the difference between rap and hip hop is rather simple. Rappers spit rhymes that are mostly illegal. MCs spit rhymes to uplift their people, right? And so he's speaking to the tradition in hip hop was that you made socially conscious, relevant music. Your lyrics spoke to the struggle of the community. Now, and if you go back in the 80s, when many people call it, but the first golden era, we saw even with Black women, they were promoting education, self-respect. We're talking about Queen Latifah, UNITY. Who you calling up? Right?
Yeah.
We talk about being African-centered. We saw this ethos of Black nationalism, right? But after, the 80s, we then saw, the music devolve into what was known as hypersexuality, violence, gangsterism, mafioso, so on and so forth. So something just to be cognizant of when we talk about, of course, the difference between hip hop and then, of course, rap. We also know there's subcategories of hip hop known as gospel hip hop. So there's gospel hip hop. I know some gospel hip rap artists. And then, of course, we even have a subset of Black nationalist hip hop groups like Dead Prayers, right? Are a great example of a Black nationalist hip hop group, right? So just want to make that aware to the audience. Also, if you're watching, hit the like button, subscribe, share, and of course, hit that notification bell. The link is in the chat. I will put the link in the chat once again if you want to join the conversation. The link is also in the description. So tap in and be part of the conversation as we discuss Hulu's forthcoming documentary, The Freaknik, The Wildest Party Never Told. I'm here with, of course, the woman, the myth, the legend, the Afrocentric social worker, none other than Sister Manika Thomas. So yes, you were stating, of course, you're not that familiar with hip hop. So I got to ask this question.
I'm not familiar.
What was it that led you to not have a connection with hip hop? Because because we grew up in that era.
Yeah, we did grow up in the era. I wasn't allowed to listen to it.
Wow. You know what? Neither was I.
Neither
was I. But I used to do it anyway. Yeah.
I know we did, but I was the child who was always, trying to do the right thing. And I listened to it vicariously because my sister and my uncle would listen to it, but it was never anything that I kind of connected with. It was nothing that ever really appealed to me in any way. So I couldn't relate to it. So it wasn't anything that I listened to.
Okay. So, I had the same experience. So growing up, we couldn't listen to it at all. This was the devil's music. Anything that wasn't Christian was considered secular, right? I mean, there was even conversations in my parents' church regarding could you listen to classical music, Right, literally. I remember there was a huge debate. And I remember when my sister had her own vehicle car. She was like 17, so I was like 10. And so we'd be driving around and she'd be listening to like hip rap music or R&B songs. And I'm like, I don't want to hear this. This is the devil's music. And I remember they was like, well, just listen to the beat. Maybe you can like the beat. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear none of it whatsoever. So I remember being like that. And getting to high school. By the time I get to high school, my sister and brother have moved out. I still believe to this day they abandoned me. Now I'm home alone with my parents. They try to talk to me every day. And but I ended up developing my own taste in music. And the first rap album that I ever listened to, actually, instead of just a song on the radio, was Nas. And as we all know, Nas is someone who was he was extremely lyrical. He promoted education, histories. So I was just hooked. Like, wow, this is what hip hop is like. And so, of course, from there, I took off. And I remember I bought Nas's third album, I Am. I probably bought that thing like 10 times. So my dad kept finding it, breaking it, throwing it away. I kept going back to the malls to catch the 20, the crosstown, go to the Salem Mall. I would buy that album over and over again at the Salem Mall. So that's my story of my introduction to hip hop. Brother Bawana, what say you?
No, I found, afternoon guys, by the way. I found it interesting that Miss Thomas said that she doesn't listen to hip hop, and as a young person, that's kind of different. And I really wanted to know, if she does listen to music. By the way, what is her genre of music? What does she like to listen to, if she does listen to music at all? But my introduction to hip hop, was a little bit of KRS, but it was really that Roots album, Things Fall Apart. That January G-Bay. Oh my goodness, man! So that's what kind of hooked me, because I would usually listen to either reggae or soca, but that's a whole other thing. So I was really interested to know, if she does listen to music, what would be a genre of music that she kind of likes to listen to.
So I'm straight R&B, and I love R&B, 80s, 90s. And I have to say, I mean, I grew up on 80s rock and roll. Like that's what I grew up listening to. Casey Kasem, like
wow.
Okay. that's what I was allowed to listen to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Because I grew up listening to nothing but gospel music. So I'm talking about Hezekiah Walker, the Love Fellowship Crusade Choir, live at Toronto, live in New York City, Radio City Music Hall, live at Atlanta Morehouse College. Right. I mean, this is what I grew up on. Kirk Franklin, John P. Key. I mean, this is what I grew up on. I literally, that's what my parents played all day long, 24/7, almost 365. So we weren't allowed to, I wasn't allowed. And then being the youngest, and I'm still little, so I'm getting whoopings. My brother and sister are teenagers, so they kind of like, well, we could kind of, I'm like, I ain't got no choice. I'm in 4th grade. Y'all in high school. I got to do what the hell they say. You know what I mean? So, but that's what
it wasn't until high school when we started getting more heavy into the church that I was exposed to more gospel music. But the type of church that I went to, it was non-instrumental. So we couldn't even listen to, we couldn't listen to music with instruments. My mom still liked a lot of the instrumental music because
is this?
It was Church of Christ.
Okay, because I was in Church of God in Christ. I was about that Kojic life growing up.
Oh yeah, y'all used to party.
Yeah, you can call it that. Yeah, I mean, just
So go ahead, sister. Sorry.
Oh,
so
I was just gonna say,
real quick,
my mom was.
What was the reason for not using instruments?
Well, it was a scripture in the Bible that I can't even remember what it is now. But it was a scripture where it talked about the way that we praise, and that it wasn't allowed for instruments. It was maybe it been a New Testament scripture. I don't remember, but
well, once again, last week we talked about low-level cults, right? Go ahead, Brother Bawana.
So prof, right now, you as a standing atheist, right? If like Hezekiah Walker was to come on, you don't think you'd be tapping your feet a little bit?
Well, so here's the thing. Well, it's black music, right? So I still listen to gospel music, and the reality of the situation, and people don't know this, but I share this with my students this semester. Gospel music is an amalgamation of what? Secular music and R&B. This is how gospel music even came to being, and it came to being during the Great Migration, particularly during the Chicago Renaissance. Most people are familiar with the Harlem Renaissance, but they're all familiar with the Chicago Renaissance. And so oftentimes there's a running joke that if you take gospel music and take out God or Jesus and put in baby or honey or boo, you have an R&B song, because the origins of gospel music comes from, of course, secular music and, of course, jazz, R&B, blues.
Yeah.
So that is a fact. That's a fact.
Yes. Matter of fact, I still remember that my favorite song growing up was Sweeter by Hezekiah Walker. And the song was entitled Sweeter As the Days Go By, His Love Gets Sweeter. Right? Talking about God's love gets sweeter. You know what I'm talking about, right? So
yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I still do listen to gospel music from time to time. It's not, something that I listen to a lot, but I mean, even though I'm not
it could be
in the church, I still enjoy it.
Yeah, it's a bit depressing. It could be a bit depressing. Literally.
Dude, I don't listen to the kind that's depressing, no.
I mean, unless you're listening to like urban gospel, a lot of gospel music, if you listen to it, like, damn, this shit is making me sad. I'm serious.
Yeah, I'll listen to that, Bakari.
Got you. But Brother Bawana, your thoughts on the Freaknik? We have the forthcoming documentary, the Freaknik, the Wildest Party Never Told. What are your thoughts?
To be honest with you, I don't know a whole lot about it. When I was living in the States, people would always talk about this Freaknik thing. The Freaknik, let's go down to the Freaknik. And I just consider it to be a big party. People will just go down there to do anything that's degenerate that they can think about. It's just this big hodgepodge of people, black folks getting together to make noise, to sleep randomly with strangers, to drink as much alcohol and take as much drugs as possible. For me, it wasn't my thing. It wasn't my thing. I tended to kind of stay away from that kind of stuff. It's not that I didn't want to party now, but for me personally, I just wanted to stay away from that kind of stuff because it was too random and anything could have happened. And for me, I would rather be in a little bit of a more controlled environment where I know I wouldn't be arrested at the end of the night. So that's why I stayed away from that.
Okay. Yeah, I was a bit different. When I was a young buck, I mean, I drunk so much, they called me Aquaman, literally. That was the nickname, because I used to put them back. Like, I'm serious. I drunk like I was 300 pounds when I was a young buck. But that was a long time ago when I was out in the world.
That was last Saturday night. Last Saturday.
Now, what I will say is this. Next Saturday is the big fight, Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, right? So I will take a couple libations, right, while I'm watching the fight. I remember my daughter was like, because I only drink wine now. I don't drink nothing serious, I drink wine. So she was like, why are you drinking wine? I said, it was a special occasion, it's a big fight. So one time I had wine with dinner, it wasn't no big fight. She's like, what's the special occasion now? Right? So I told her, I was like, well, you're here. That's a special occasion. Like,
that's funny.
Yeah, so she got
your kids will call you out with your hypocrisies, man. They'll call you out quick.
Absolutely. So, like, we have a rule, no phones at the dinner table. And one time I was going through my phone, she said, no phones at the dinner table. So you could either take that and put it in your room. Like, she was talking to me. She was the parent. I can't be a hypocrite. She ain't gonna take me serious. So
that's right. Yeah, they'll call you out.
Yeah, and she's at the age now that when she wants to kind of, being a teenager, buck against and develop their own sense of self-authorship and autonomy. So yeah, absolutely.
And
so they are making. Sorry, Mr. Thomas. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. You go ahead.
So they are making a documentary out of Freaknik?
Yes, sir.
That's ridiculous. Okay.
And so part of the question, a lot of people are saying, okay, well, where's the Girls Gone Wild documentary? Right? This was something that was really big back in the day. And so many people, and in the Girls Gone Wild, there were sexual assaults that took place. So many people are looking at this with a concern and a belief that this is going to be another way of trying to negatively project the Black community as a community and a culture rooted in what? Deviant behavior.
Yes. Yeah.
And we
I
know
can
Girls
definitely
Gone
see
Wild was
that.
predominantly white.
Yes. Right, which was the total opposite of what Freaknik is, but it was definitely two of the same thing, just a different culture.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I think that within our community, I think that that time is past now. I don't know why someone would want to reprise, this interest in the what people did in the '90s and things of that nature. They're always trying to hurt us in a non-constructive situation, and I don't want young people seeing this and getting ideas and going, hey, we should do this too. They did it back in the day. Now it's our time. No, no, no. You have to let that pass now. I think that
Mm.
we as a community we are evolving, and I think that there needs to be an interest in other kinds of things where collectively we could get together, still have fun, but at
Mm.
the end of the night, no one goes to jail, no one is sexually assaulted, no one is beat up, and no one is arrested. So I think that we should evolve out of that level of ridiculousness at this point.
And to
And I
speak to
think,
that, go right ahead, Monique. I'm sorry.
oh, I was just gonna say, I think Black people as a whole, like, we're just tired of the narrative. We're tired of the rhetoric. It's getting old. I think we're really coming into a place where we're wanting to, reestablish our identity in ways that really speaks to our values without being um kind of reminded of ways that we may have operated previously. I think for the generation who may have been in those videos, if they are doing something better for themselves now, it's the reason why they transitioned from what they were doing before to what they're doing now. I do believe that we're at a space and time where we're really wanting to create a new narrative for our culture. And, I just think that this is just another way to kind of try to push us back into um an old narrative about who we are as a people, when we're really doing things now in 2023, 2021, up to this point. We're really doing things to kind of move ourselves away from those ideas and those identities, and really trying to establish ourselves in a different way. So I don't know that this, again, the timing is intentional, but I believe that this is something that we could actually stand to let this lie. Like, I don't
Mm.
know that this will benefit or have any value to the culture whatsoever to create this
So
documentary.
you're saying we need to let sleeping dogs lie?
Yes, yes.
So I will say this,
Absolutely.
and you're familiar back home, Dayton, Ohio, Gym City Stand Up, West Dayton Strong, just a kid from Dayton. There's got those shout outs out there, right? We
Yeah.
had the African Culture Festival. Monica, I think you're aware that at one point I was on the board of the Culture Festival. And
Mm-hmm.
we had conversations every year. And we were clear, myself, Marlon, Tommy Owens, we are not going to allow alcohol to be sold at the festival because we knew what would happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so
Yep.
sometimes it takes those who are in charge, right, to make sure that there are some clear boundaries that are being set to not allow these type of things to take place.
Absolutely. I agree. But in this case, it was co-opted. I mean,
Yes, it
it
was.
wasn't outside the culture. Typically, that happens from people coming from outside the culture and then co-opting our ideas and our intellectual property and taking it, monetizing it, and then creating it. Similar to what we were talking about with hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
how that was ripped from our culture, turned into something else, packaged back to us in a way that was destructive and detrimental. So this, from what I could see, was actually people within the culture who maybe saw this as an opportunity to continue to make money from it. When the city of Atlanta said, this is not a good look for the city. We don't want, this negativity associated with what we're trying to do, with the whole spirit of HBCU. Like, I don't think they wanted that connotation,
Mm-hmm.
with the students who were there and what they were trying to build and create. Granted, I do believe that there is a lot of respectability politics that happens within the HBCU culture. But with that, I believe that they wanted to create this foundation of education, this place of knowledge and creation where people can really come and make something of themselves. So with that, I truly believe that they didn't want to be associated with something that would kind of leave a negative connotation in people's mind about the HBCU experience. But with that, with it being co-opted, we had the opportunity to continue it in the vein in which it was going, but maybe we saw opportunity to make money from it, or saw that it could be bigger, or that it could have a national reach. I don't really know what the intentions were behind it. Maybe it was something around money, to where they saw it as a money grab. But in that, in having that willingness to get more money from it, I think it happened at the detriment of the community.
So very quickly, and I think that's a great point, but I want to play this video from the Freaknik Instagram page, right? So I want to play this video, and then let's unpack this video, right? And it's tongue in cheek, but I think it kind of speaks to one of the issues that we, of course, were talking about. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull this up here.
Man, I just saw.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Documentary on Hulu. My mom's was on there, freaking on 10 dudes in a Cadillac.
Damn, homie, that's messed up.
I mean, it's one thing that they recorded her, but they ain't have to take her sandals.
You mean the Monica sandals with the short haircut and the white skirt?
Yeah.
Oh, damn, I seen that too.
What we naming this song?
Freaknik Veterans. She a Freaknik veteran. She should wear a Letterman. Twerking on the news reporter, twerking on the weatherman. They caught her ass on VHS. She used to be a clapper. Why she look familiar? Cause now she is the pastor. It might be your grandmother. It might be your aunts. You love her now, but she was selling pussy down on Ponce. A Freaknik veteran doing a traffic pole tease. Even had her whole cheek spread in front of police. It's gonna probably bring you a whole lot of drama to see your nana was a hood rat hoochie mama, and we don't know the father of when she got prego. Your daddy got chose cause he drove a Winnebago. She got her cheeks grabbed up and did a lot of mileage, and probably by some niggas that wasn't even in college. They pulled her box braids while she was giving up the box. She went to Freaknik. She was a thought before thoughts. Get out my studio.
So I guess that's one of the reasons why you don't like rap music, right?
I mean, what can I say?
Right. So this issue of debauchery, right? Ratchet culture is what it's known as now. This concept of Black women being hypersexual. We know the origins of that behavior. We find it during the Middle Passage, unfortunately. Where Black women were being sexually assaulted, and the basis for or defense for, of course, the white shipmates and captains sexually assaulting Black women was, well, they're sexually lascivious, they want it all the time, but there's no way that you can actually rape them. What do you believe has led to Black women internalizing that concept and idea of being sexually lascivious?
That's a lot. So I'm still processing the video. Like,
yeah.
Okay, so what led to Black women being sexually lascivious?
Well, embracing the idea of being sexually lascivious. I'm not saying that Black women are, right? I'm not going to, do that. But the idea of embracing this concept and idea of being sexually lascivious. We've seen this with the proliferation of course, reality TV shows. We saw this, of course, during rap and hip hop videos in the 90s, where it was the thing to be a video vixen, right?
Yeah.
So, and then we see this now with this concept of ratchet femininity, right? This concept and idea that one should embrace the sci-fi, embrace being a Jezebel, and that somehow is liberating.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. The idea of what we envisioned and thought to be liberation coming from the 50s and 60s, and what that looked like compared to what liberation looked like in the 90s or in the 80s. I think you have this shift of, how we define that. And then I think, I can't remember who said it, but how the music is intended to reflect the times.
Mm-hmm.
Is that James Brown? I think he may have said that.
Okay.
But with that, if that is true, if the music is intended to reflect the times, or the music should reflect the times, it might have been Nina Simone, but I do believe the previous
Nina Simone, by the way.
Yeah, I do believe that.
I see Westside Mike is tapping in. Make sure you come in, Westside Mike. I need to tap in and be part of the conversation. Westside Mike is from the city. He's from the West Dayton as well, 937.
Okay.
But he's holding it down currently right now in the ATL. So we definitely want
Oh,
to get him to
nice.
tap in and be part of the conversation. So the link is in the chat,
Yeah.
brother. Go ahead, Sister Tanya.
Yeah. So I do, and please call me Manika. I don't
Oh, I
want to be called
right.
Manika.
Manika. All right.
So I do believe that when we see the shift in the music, we see a shift in the culture. When we see this commercialization of our music, then you see the shift in the women who are being in the videos, the things that they're doing in the videos. So with that, I believe that with the whole idea of liberation, I do believe that it brought some of that in, this whole idea of freedom, sexual liberty, being able to express ourselves without being hindered by societal norms or societal standards, being able to define on our own terms what femininity meant to us and not kind of being bound and held by definitions that were maybe patriarchal in some way. So I do believe that that played a part in it. But I don't know that that's all of the things, but just from you asking me that question, those are the top of mind things that kind of come up for me.
Brother Bawana, what say you?
Yeah, what comes up for me is I think the cause of it was mass marketing, mass conditioning, and I think that there was a perceived financial reward for engaging in these kinds of activities. For instance, you had the little Kims of the world, where
Okay.
she was just this sexy vixen lady who was sexually liberal, very liberal, and she was a very wealthy kind of person. That and it was an archetype type of figure that after is the Foxy Browns, and then you have the Cardi B's of the days and the Megan Thee Stallion, who carry the kind of same archetype type of rules. That they are very sexually liberated women who are extremely wealthy. They can do what they want to, and they can make demands of men. But what they don't, what is left out of the discussion first and foremost is, I think that when you discuss that the highest selling rap record for a female was Lauryn Hill.
Lauryn Hill, yes.
Lauryn Hill was the opposite of all these kinds of women.
Yes.
So what's up with that? So
Yes.
obviously there was some person behind the scenes trying to herd a future generation of women in a particular direction. If the highest selling record is Lauryn Hill, who was the antithesis of that image. What is also not necessarily discussed in this dialogue of this female liberalism. Do what you want to do. Be sexually free as you wish to be. Is the consequences of that. That's not really discussed, because when people talk about the people with the highest age rates, who is that? Who is that? When we discuss the unwanted pregnancies that occur within our communities, the single motherhood, who is that? Who is the face of that? And it's not to say that there's a direct consequence, but it could be. I mean, I think that.
If I could speak to that. So when I was in my doctoral program at OSU, and then most people who are familiar with higher education, the higher you go, it tends to be dominated by women, right? Women are the predominant demographic group. And we were in class, and I remember they were talking about the slut walk, and one of the students said she took part in the slut walk and it was so liberating, and she wanted to promote this concept of being sexually lascivious. And they asked me what I thought. And I'm like, one, I'm a parent, so fuck no. You know what I mean? But then I said, number two, I said, you're not considering the consequences that come from this type of behavior on one of pregnancies, the likelihood, the propensity for being sexually assaulted, the likelihood of what sexually transmitted diseases, right? And I said, so you're kind of leaning in, right? But you're not thinking of what the long. You can do whatever you want, but the consequences that you get are the consequences that you get. So I think that's something to consider as well. You mentioned, Brother Bawana, this issue of you said mass marketing. We all understand that. Of course, anytime you're trying to make money, you have to have a marketing department, right? But you also said mass conditioning. Could you elaborate on that? Mass conditioning.
Sure. Like I said before, what I said is I think we was discussing whore culture at one point. And I think that, when you have a society, if we as a community decided to collectively get together to practice some forms of discipline and to reprise this role of familyhood, within our communities become essentially stronger. So if we would have communities that are separated that's all over the place, is broken down in terms of our family relationships and things like that, who benefits? Who
Mhm.
benefits? So
Mhm.
it would be in the best interest to create a society, in particular where you want to have and have nots, to create a culture of, in particular, of women and men too, but of women who have the mindset of, girl, you don't need nobody to do nothing for you. You could do whatever you want to do. So you have to create a mind behind it. You have to
Mhm.
create a thinking behind it. In the same way where you condition young black males to think that the only way or opportunity for them to get money is through drugs, selling drugs and doing all kind of illicit behavior. Who benefits from that? The prison
Mhm.
industrial complex. So it would be in their interest to put monies into creating music to condition the minds of very young people.
Mhm.
So for me, that's the nexus that I see. This
Okay.
unseen hand.
So,
Sorry, brother. This
so,
unseen
so,
hand creating. Sorry, brother. Go ahead.
so I'm gonna play white devil's advocate, right? To provide some device. So what some would argue that you're stating that the solution is patriarchy. The solution is nuclear families, and some have argued, particularly in the black community, even though they may be coming from a feminist perspective, they may be left leaning, that the nuclear family doesn't work for black people, and that patriarchy is rooted in what Eurocentrism. What would you say to that type of argument? To that type
I
of
would
argument?
say great. So I would say this. I would say go into the prisons and speak to the men and find out basically how they was raised, and you will see this common element that exists among
Mhm.
the young men. They are raised by single moms. Why? And for me, it's not to suggest that women cannot raise. Well, some would say women can't raise men, but there have been many women who've been on their own, who have been successful at raising men. However, if you was to interview many of the black men in jail, percentage wise, you would see a large number of the men in prison who are raised by females. There is a connection there. They don't have their fathers. They don't have that strong sense of direction. And in looking for direction, and many of them take to the streets. That responsibility is not there. For me, from my standpoint, I
Mhm.
believe that there is a connection, and if you want to back it up with evidence, I would say go to the prisons and just ask many of the black men who are in jail, how was they raised? How was they raised? Who was they raised by? And I'm not pointing the finger at the women exclusively and say, well, it's all your fault. I'm saying that, in a nuclear environment, there's balance. The social stresses of one parent, you could balance it out between the two. Yeah, I mean, when you're trying to raise a child. But that's my thoughts on it. I don't know
Okay.
what your brother
Sister
got.
Manika, you look like you want to say something.
Well, I was just listening, but I was really thinking about the question, and I don't think that, to some degree, black people weren't different in that we wanted to assimilate into American culture and in American society. I believe that we wanted at some point to be seen as equal. We wanted equal access,
Mhm.
and we wanted the things for our families, just like other cultures had access for things for their families. But
Mhm.
I think in that we never really stopped to ask ourselves, what would it look like if we wanted those things but still defined our cultural norms by things that benefited us culturally, socially, and economically. So not so much wanting what we created to look like what white people had, but to create what we wanted in a way that worked for our family structure, the values that we wanted to instill within our families, and really inoculating our families and our communities from things that would be detrimental to
Mhm.
them. So
So,
I think in our effort to kind of assimilate into American culture, we lost on a large majority. I think we lost sight of what that could look like if we were to instill cultural values that really spoke to the needs and what we needed for the culture, as opposed to simply just assimilating into the dominant culture.
right. And the reason why I asked that question is because the Westside Mike, he has a statement here. The majority of black men or people in general that are incarcerated or face struggles or raised in single parent household, that's proved with statistics. Appreciate you, Westside Mike. I hope that you could tap in and be part of the conversation. I will put the link in the chat right below your comment. And the reason why I asked that question is because this is a prevailing belief, right? What most people do not know is that several medieval and classical African cultures were rooted in the nuclear family. Ancient Kemet, Ethiopia, Great Zimbabwe, Songhai Empire in West Africa. We even know that patriarchy was practiced throughout Africa, particularly in the Zulu, right? Ethiopia, ancient Kemet, so on and so forth. Songhai, Mali, Ghana empires. And so I always ask that question because many people make the argument that, oh, the nuclear family doesn't work, when in reality, that's just not the case. I think a lot of it is rooted in, and there are a number of reasons why people have children and the relationships don't work. But I think the fact that it's not valued anymore, and as Brother Bawana stated, the social pressures are divided evenly amongst the parents. And I know growing up in a two-parent household, my parents, in fact, next Sunday, I'm gonna have to buy them some roses or something. They'll be celebrating their 46th wedding anniversary.
Oh, nice.
Right. And so growing up, I experienced a situation where it wasn't all of my dad, it wasn't all of my mother. I got the balance from birth to the date I moved out of my parents' home of masculine and feminine energy from birth to 17, 18, whatever it was when I moved out. So it's oftentimes something that many people dismiss. They argue that it's rooted in Eurocentrism, but the history shows that that's not the case, right? The history shows, if you study African history, that African cultures were patriarchal, right? And so, and I have like a laundry list of literature behind me to substantiate such a claim. But we tend to find that argument being made, and I think it's part of it is rooted to, of course, feminism. And a lot of people have taken on the feminist ideology, and that is a belief that, of course, men of all cultures, irrespective of one's socioeconomic status, political beliefs, even religion, are not only oppressors of women, but actual detrimental and a harm to the not only to the family unit. And so we're seeing now feminists argue that a family is just women and children, no men whatsoever. And so I think that is actually harmful because we know the men are the ones who tend to not only provide the structure and discipline and order, but also protection for the community. And we know that if you look at history, you go anywhere around the world, when men are absent, the women and children typically are vulnerable.
So Prof. So the new argument, what's being told now is that the women should just have a child and just don't have a mind. It's just he's not supposed to.
And the reason why I'm familiar with this is because I work in higher ed, and so feminism is prevalent, extremely prevalent in higher educational spaces. And so I'm around, I'm hearing these conversations. I'm like, hey, where'd you get that article? I'm reading the articles for myself. Right? I mean, I have bell hooks. I have Patricia Hill Collins behind me here on the shelf. And so I've read the literature for myself. And this is the argument that's being made that, of course, this idea and concept of having a family, there's no man involved, should be beneficial to the Black community. However, what we tend to find is the data, the statistics show that it's actual opposite, that the children do worse when the father is not present. So it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack. But, you know, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson, and we know he's one of the primary progenitors of Black male studies, argues that, of course, with feminism, we're not talking about Africana womanism, but feminism. What we tend to find is almost treated like a religion. Person states it, you have to believe it, even if it's not backed up by any type of facts, data, or statistics. Brother Brandon, what say you? Pan-Africanism strikes back.
Hey man, what's up? What's up? I saw the link that you had sent me, and I definitely wanted to be a part of this conversation. The Freaknik situation, I was gonna speak on it myself. The whole thing is everything is about victimization, victimhood. You know, from what I'm hearing about it, based on some of the videos I watched, it's just talking about how like basically like men were like taking advantage of women and all this type of stuff. But me, I'm just a realist. I'm like, you know, women walk into situations knowing all well and good what's going on, and they say, hey, I want to be a part of that. So I just think I think women are kind of like that accomplice in certain things that just has the fortune of, or has the advantage of like plausible deniability, right? If things go bad, I can just say this guy forced me to do it, right? People don't know this, but I come from a long line of like all my uncles and stuff were like, they were pimps, legitimately like street dudes, pimps with hoes and all that. I remember specifically when I was young, my grandma would go and tell my uncle to come to church with her on Sunday. We'd be all in the car. She'd pull up on where he do his thing at and be like, come on, boy, come to church with me. And he would be like telling his girls, y'all better not leave this street corner when I leave to go to church with my mom real quick. Y'all better be out here when I get back or it's going to be problems. And the thing, man, it's just but the thing was, man, they were willing. They were right in there plotting with him. You could, when you would see him behind the scenes, they're scheming together. And it's a lot, in many ways, it's like that with the black community and all communities, because you could say men are taking advantage of women. Men are forcing women to do this, and they're sex trafficking. Well, have you been on OnlyFans? Have you been on some of these escort sites on the internet? Women are proprietors of their own enslavement, if you want to call it that. Like, men are not the enemy. Most times women would do exactly what they're doing with a man on their own if there wasn't a man around, because those people come into contact because they're two people who think alike, and they find a common ground and they build whatever they can on it. So I just don't buy that narrative. Black men are predators and stuff. Anyone could be a predator, especially women or men. And we just got to stop trying to look at other people to justify as an excuse. We have to stop blaming other people for the decisions that we make and the things we walk into with 100% awareness of what the hell's going on.
Any pushback to Brother Brandon?
Nah, I appreciate the commentary, because women are there's this unsaid dialogue that women are just these innocent little creatures who can do nefarious things. and as the brother said, sometimes when you see a pimp and a prostitute, these are two people who have a common interest coming together. It's not necessarily one of, some people believe that is one of complete manipulation, and that's not always the case. Sometimes people come together because they have common interests, and sometimes some women are nefarious and then intent in doing certain things, and sometimes that's not necessarily spoken of in very liberal circles. Women have agency just as men do, and with that agency, sometimes they do very good things, sometimes they get in nefarious situations and do nefarious acts as well. So that needs to be stated.
Okay, maybe some balance. Go ahead.
If I could respond. So, Bakari, this was one of the reasons why I wanted us to create this platform together, because I think it's very easy to take a very nuanced and complicated situation and boil it down between a gender war between male and female. Mm-hmm. When we know from a Pan-Africanist perspective, a historical perspective, a cultural perspective, these issues are much more complex than just mm-hmm. looking at male versus female, pointing the finger, blaming each other, saying who needs to be accountable and who doesn't need to be accountable. I think it's time that we elevate this conversation and bring more of the nuances in, as opposed to strictly looking on what women know and what they don't, and whether or not men are predators or not. All of that is still happening within a cultural context, and we're not considering how did women, the way that they perceive that interest conversion, kind of what Bawana was talking about. If there is an interest conversion that happens when a woman is engaging with the man, what's the cultural undertone that's happening there? What is a woman believing that she's getting? What is the force that's there, or the fear that's there, or what is the unmet need that's there? I don't think that we can have the conversation without one, including mental health, which is my area of expertise, and not just looking at the surface of what's taking place, but what's the function of the behavior. So if you just look at the thing that's happening and what's being done, you miss the opportunity to get to the why. Like, why are people making the decisions that they're making? And oftentimes it's not just to be in cahoots with a man so they can get what they want. It's oftentimes a much deeper reason why we're doing the things that we're doing and we're making the decisions that we're making. And it's not always face value, because I know what I'm getting into, so this is what I'm choosing to do. It's never that simple. So I just think I would definitely want to elevate the conversation to be able to talk about the nuances that exist in the decision making, and not simply looking at face value for what is actually being done.
And I appreciate that, Manika, because we know oftentimes what can happen is these very rather introspective issues tend to be the conversation is surface level, right?
Yeah.
And a great example of that when we talk about the FBA, African immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, and what we tend to find is people are having surface level conversations that aren't going deep, layers deep into what's really taking place and what's really going on. So I appreciate you there. Brother Brandon, I'm going to let you respond, but I'm going to, of course, get to the brothers and sisters, of course, in the chat here. So the true blue 1992 states, I think, falling into that kind of lifestyle as a result of lack of education, resources, and support systems. However, at a certain point, you have to have the will and the want to leave. Understood? And brother or sister, I don't know. Yes, it is complex and in some cases systematic. So hope you could tap in. If you could join the conversation, explain how it's systematic, right? Definitely want to hear that. And Westside Mike says it's not a gender war. It's just taking personal responsibility for your actions. So with that being said, Brother Brandon, what say you?
Yeah, West Side Mike took the words right out of my mouth, because things get minimized into like, yo, y'all trying to start a gender war. In reality, we were trying to start an accountability war, and that got reduced down to, oh, the man's doing it because he's a creep. The woman's doing it because there's all these different nuanced reasons and a deeper meaning and all that stuff. Listen, that stuff works for people who ain't never experienced nothing. My cousin plotted on her ex with her new boyfriend and killed him to rob him because he had money. You can't tell me no nuance. We grew up in the same house, same support system, everything the same. Why did she choose to plot? She was the mastermind. That's why she got freaking 30 years in prison and that dude got 12. She was the mastermind. It's not. It's just two degenerate people coming together to do degeneracy. And the luxury that women have is plausible deniability. They can always say, yeah, I robbed the bank with him. I'm probably the person who planned the bank robbery, but I was a victim. He forced me. And the way the world is set up, they're going to believe her. Listen, I grew up in a house with all women. Maurice, how many women is in our family versus men? A lot, right? It's like 3 dudes in our family and like 1 million women. They can plot, they can scheme, they can connive, they can commit crime, they can sell dope, use dope, do all that, all while telling you that you don't know your asshole from your elbow. Women are very capable. I am an advocate of equal treatment of men and women because I understand women are very capable, and they are capable of taking the leadership role in degenerate activity. They are also capable of using plausible deniability to escape all accountability for some degenerate behavior when things go left. And that's the conversation that we need to have. Y'all saw Set It Off. It wasn't no men involved in Set It Off. They robbed them banks just fine without us. But these women now will want you to believe that no, they were innocent lambs who were extorted into the life of crime. It's like, man, look, I've been broke as hell, Professor Lumumba, and guess what? And I ain't never once thought about robbing nobody. Never thought about running up in nobody else. I just dealt with it. So it is equality, and it's not punching down on women, because I'm a whole degenerate man, as you've seen on my channel, Professor Lumumba. You've seen on my channel. I go after a degenerate man, just like I go after a degenerate women. Just don't try to be like, it's psychological. We all dealing with trauma. We all had, rough upbringings. We all went through the same stuff. Men got touched like women got touched when they was little. There's none of that. My trauma is more than yours. It's just, are you making the right decisions in the end? And if you're not, how you gonna get to making them? It's like the world.
I can attest, because I've been on your channel. He is an equal opportunity smoker, right? So he does not discriminate. If someone's engaging in degenerate behavior, he calls them out irrespective of the gender, or maybe even the race or ethnic background, right? So that is something that I can attest to. Monica, did you want to
No, I would like to hear your response to that.
You're gonna put me on the spot. So I understand where he's coming from. It's something that I've seen, right? Working in higher education is a very extremely feminist space. And it's this concept I've always called the perpetual victim, trying to be a member of the special victims unit, right? That when things go bad, right, I could say it's because of patriarchy. I could say it's because women are oppressed. And that's why I made these decisions. And typically that's not a fallback that men typically can have, right? When we have to face the consequences of our behavior when they're nefarious in nature. So that is something I can't understand. I do know that there are times where women lie by omission, right? I've experienced that with my son and my daughter, where my daughter has made some claims about her brother, and then I get on him, and he's like, "That's not what happened at all." And I'm like, "Oh." And I'm like, "Why did you tell me the whole story?" Right? So I think it's something that people do, right? But I think, you know, what I think what Brother Brandon is speaking to is this Victorian idea of femininity, to where women can do no wrong, they're morally superior to men, and therefore they should be believed, right, at a rate that is, of course, higher than what men are believed. So I think that there's some truth there. I think sometimes the way Brother Brandon, of course, shares his viewpoints is hard to digest, right? But I would agree with you as well, Monica, that yes, we are all dealing with issues. People have different factors that play a role: desperation, a personal belief, self-efficacy, that belief to someone engaging in some type of behaviors that many of us would be vehemently opposed to. But at the same time, I would argue, because I've shared my story with you when we were in CAU, that, you know, I at one point was a miscreant, right? I should have 8 felonies. I have 0. Right? Lord, thank you, Jesus, right? Right? But one of the things that helped me move away from that behavior was the personal responsibility. That even when I had the money to bail myself out of jail, my father said, "We're not going to come down and sign the papers," and would tell my brother and sister not to do it as well. So I got tired of having to sit in jail and fight cases when I could have been out. And said, "You know what? I need to do something better. I need to do something else in my life, because this is for the birds."
Yeah. So if I could ask one other thing. So based off of what you said, if you were to put your views and perspective about, I don't know, Brandon, this is my first time kind of seeing you and hearing you. So I appreciate
Shout out to Long Beach, California, the LBC.
Okay, nice. I appreciate your feedback and input. But I am curious, based off of what you said, because the focus of a lot of the things that we both believe in, our value system, is based in Pan-Africanism. So with that being said, in this whole conversation around accountability and victimization, where would a Pan-Africanist view fit within this conversation, in your opinion?
Question.
The Pan-Africanist view is situational awareness. That's what we learned from our progenitors, Marcus Garvey, Martin Delany, all of them. Understand the situation you in and make decisions based on that. And the people who don't have the capacity to do so, they just gonna have to get left behind. That's the Pan-Africanist view on it. That's what Garvey said. He said, some of y'all ain't no good here, and some of y'all ain't gonna be no good over there. So y'all gonna have to stay here. We all know the situation we're in, the state of Black America, the different things we face, the challenges. They are so acute that even a kid can recognize the dysfunction within the Black American demographic of America. So it's not a matter of I didn't know or ignorance, legitimate ignorance. It's willful ignorance, or just rather just neglecting to actually think about or acknowledge what's going on with you. So people like that, you just gonna have to leave them behind. The other people want to do better, gonna have to say, look, man, I already know I got the odds stacked against me. I can't hit that crack pipe. I already know I got the odds stacked against me. I can't run up in this store waving a gun talking about giving me the money. And that's the difference between people who are Pan-African people legitimately and people who are just using Pan-Africanism as a vehicle for victimhood, or to play in the victim Olympics. Everybody knows what situation we're in. That's why Professor Lumumba is a professor. He works every day. He earns his money. He may have had a life, been in the streets. I was in the streets too. But being in the streets, even while in the streets, everything we did, we knew that this was not the right thing to do. We understood the consequences. And like Nipsey Hussle said, you got to weigh the risk and the reward and make a decision based on that. And we chose to go left versus our friends who knew this stuff was wrong just like we did and said, you know what, F it, I'm gonna double down on it. Now all my friends, every last one of my friends that I consider a friend is either dead or in jail. Why? Because when I was like, man, you know, I'm gonna go get a job at the grocery store. They was like, nah, cuz we gotta go out here and hit this lick. We gotta go out here and do this and do that. And I said, cool, I still love you. You my brother, all that stuff. They just made a decision. Did we both know it was wrong? Hell yeah. It wasn't like we grew up in a different neighborhood or a different experience. Them dudes stayed at my house or I stayed at their house. We all had the same experience. It was just all about decision making.
And if I can speak to this, and I'm going to share a story, many of you may be unaware of this, but when I was 19 years old, I colluded with two of my friends to rob a grocery store, to rob a store, a restaurant. We went to Walmart a month in advance, bought zip ties, ski masks, gloves, the whole nine. The day we were going to rob the restaurant, we were going to rob the restaurant, because the restaurant closed at 9 o'clock. We were going to rob the restaurant at 8:45. At 5 o'clock, I was at my grandparents' house, and it flashed on the news, live from News Center 7. A guy was trying to rob the same restaurant that we were going to rob that evening, and he was caught, and they had him live on the news. Why did you do it, sir? And he says, you know, I was having tough times, and my grandfather said he's going to have some real tough times. And that to me, that was like, oh, shit. That could have been me. So I would agree that a lot of times there's a cost-benefit analysis. There's a belief that, hey, I won't get caught. And as I teach my children now, a criminal mind is a stupid mind, right? You could be a real estate agent. You could learn how to fly, plane to the friendly skies. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, one time I was locked up. True story. I did like 3 months. I was fighting the case and I ended up beating my case. And I was locked up, and I'm only 6 foot tall. And the guy was like, hey, I think I missed my calling. He's telling me this. He was a D-boy. And I said, well, what was your calling? He said, man, I should have been a basketball player. I said, man, you ain't no bleeping taller than me. How the F you going to be a basketball player? And I told him, I said, the problem is you only believe that the only thing you could do in life was sell drugs or play basketball. That's rooted in your own self-confidence, self-efficacy, believe in what you can do in life. So sometimes, and I will say this, I think some of it does go to households. And we know, Brandon, if you're being honest, but Bawana, if you're being honest, Monique, if you're being honest, there are some households in our community that are criminal incubators. We got to be honest here. Literally, those kids are being taught at an early age how to be a criminal. There's a book in the house, right? They freaking blacks. They know how to clean the gun. Whole nine. And this typically starts with young black boys. And Dr. Joanna Kajoufi talks about this as early as 4th, 5th, and 6th grade in his book, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. That the criminalization of black boys start early, typically in elementary school, where they start getting turned on some ways, turned out into a life of crime. And it can start as something as petty as shooting dice in the bathroom. And of course, it devolves into other, of course, nefarious behavior. Go ahead, Brother Bawana.
No, I've heard what the brothers had to say, you know, and they see the world in a very black and white way. And within that black and white, you know, from listening to them, there's a whole lot of complexities that goes into it. I am curious, though, because Sister Thomas says that we need to raise the level of the conversation. The conversation needs to go deeper. So I would like to really try to get some understanding in what she actually means by that. Because she even though we may say the world is black and white, she tends to see a whole lot of gray in between. So I really would like to get some understanding of the gray.
I appreciate that. And the reason why I say that is because just in the nature of the conversation that we're having, I still think that we can't negate the fact that the entire psychology of Black people's brains were changed because of what we experience as a culture. So if you take our behavior and you look at how we act, how we interact, how we engage, and you just look at it on a surface level and you do no further examination, you do no further questioning, not even just on the female side. So I heard Brandon say, you know, kind of not just thinking about what the female experience is. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about us kind of giving leeway and giving grace just for females. That's not what I mean. What I mean is we have to look at the entire way that our psychology was impacted based off of what we experienced as a community. And then we have to ask ourselves, can we fully hold each other accountable based off the knowledge that you have about what happened to my psychology as a woman? Can I hold you accountable as a Black man based off of what I know about what happened to your psychology as a Black male? And also considering the fact that if you did experience trauma, if you did have things that happen in your family system, in your community, have you ever worked through that? Have you ever healed that? What is now your perception of Black women? What is now my perception of Black men? If we don't really tease that out and try to understand what part of that was formulated in trauma and what part of that is a real part of our cultural story, then we'll continue on with these narratives and perspectives that are Black and white, because we're not looking at the full context of what we experience as a community and as a whole, and we'll move beyond blaming to empathy. I think that's what we miss, is when we don't consider what happened to us psychologically. There is a lot of blaming and there's not a lot of empathy, because we're pointing the finger to see who's to blame. That's a very base level way to look at what happened to us, is to say that it was the man's fault, it was the woman, who's been the victim, who's to blame. That's not where our conversation needs to begin. We need to acknowledge that what happened on both sides. I would want to hear you say your perspective around what you see women endured that would cause them to make the decisions that they made, and on the male side as well. So it's not just about who did what, it's about how do we get here.
At the end of the day, like, I really encourage like Black people to go look at all the videos by this girl who escaped from North Korea called her name is Yeomi Park. She was on Joe Rogan. She was interviewing with what's the guy's name, the psychologist guy, Jordan Peterson, and she really gives you some
North Korea.
Yeah, she gives you some. Right. She gives you some really eye-opening revelations on being oppressed, psychological damage, trauma, and stuff like that. And the reality is the trauma that we use as really an excuse for us making decisions that we know are wrong is pales in comparison to what some people have actually gone through and came out on the other side of that. When it comes to the Black community, because I'm Black, I did crime, I went to jail. It's really as simple as flipping a switch. It's not this long drawn out process where you got to go from A to Z and what caused this and my mom and all this stuff. The simple way you know that is by this formula. If you know what you're doing is wrong, then you can stop it immediately. Because even when you're a criminal, you could be a hardened criminal. When you're doing crime, you know inside that that's the wrong thing to do. The only difference is what you want at that moment, your drive to get what you want at that moment is stronger than your moral compass, which tells you what's wrong or right. That's all it is. It's not a matter of trauma. It don't got nothing to do with your upbringing. It got nothing to do with your mom beating you, your dad abandoning you. It has nothing to do with those things. It simply has to do with you want to, whatever you stand to gain from what you're doing is more important to you than doing what's right. And I'll give you a basic reference. Look at a woman who's a prostitute. A woman go out on the corner, sell her body all night, get money, come back, get her money to a pimp. Now, what is the driving force behind that? It's not wanting to be rich, because she don't get to spend none of the money. It's not getting new clothes, her nails done, her hair done, her feet done, because at the end of the day, she has the money in her hand. If she wanted to do that, she could go walk and go get that done. The reality is she has become an accomplice to the scheme of the pimp. She is a willing participant in his scheme of getting rich, or his scheme of just supporting his drug habit. Maybe she develops a drug habit too. And in that moment, what they're doing together their combined scheme is more important than any scale of morality that they could ever ascribe to. It ain't got nothing to do with their upbringing. It just has to do with what they want to do at that time. And that is why even a drug addict, if you go to any drug treatment facility, what do they say? You have to want to quit. You could go through all the equations. You could sit up in class talking about your childhood. You could go through all the therapy. The only time you're going to successfully quit, trust me, I have an aunt who was on crack for 20 years. She said, I quit when I decided I was tired of just smoking dope. And she said, I have been to programs, all that, all throughout my years, but I just wasn't ready to stop. So when people argue, you got to know the psychology. You got to know this. The lived experience of people doing this, and the people who are honest about it, they totally debunk that notion, because they will all tell you, once I got tired of smoking crack and living in the streets, I just got up and stopped and went on ahead and started living my life. Now, maybe I might have had a relapse or almost went back, but at the end of the day, I just checked myself. How does a drug counselor who was once a crackhead sit up and now counsel crackheads without getting sucked into smoking crack again? He just no longer wants to do that. The mind is very powerful, and we don't give it enough credit because it doesn't fit into our modus operandi of being the consummate victim class of the United States of America.
So let me say this, and I think this is a great conversation because it shows the diversity of thought in the Pan-Africanist community. And I want to direct this question to Monica. I heard what you stated. So the question I have is, you talk about the traumatic experiences Black people have had since we were brought here to America. You're speaking to the Holocaust of enslavement. You're speaking to the numerous anti-Black retrenchment initiatives that we've had to face since so-called emancipation. But we haven't seen this type of behavior, by and large, even through Jim Crow, chattel enslavement, Black Code, sharecropping, etc. And so, how do you make the argument that dealing with even during the nadir of race relations, where anti-Blackness is at a zenith in America to now, how do you make the connection?
The connection between
anti-Black racism, anti-Black oppression, and this type of deviant, deleterious behavior.
Okay, so there's a couple things. One, I think it's important to know when we're talking about this idea of trauma, one, we have to understand, again, that it fundamentally changes not only the way that our brain works, but it also changes the way that we reason. It changes our problem solving. It changes the psychology of the brain and our decision making. It physiologically changes our bodies.
Right.
So a lot of things are happening.
Monica, just for people who are watching, Monica is a licensed professional social worker. Okay, she has a bachelor's degree in social work, a master's degree in social work. She has her own private practice, and she is known as the Afrocentric social worker. So this is not conjecture. This isn't hyperbole. She is a professional. And so I just want to make that clear to everyone who's watching and everyone who's on right now. Go right ahead. I apologize for cutting you off.
No, that's okay. So even when I hear Brandon talk, my mind already goes to where his psychology is, because I can hear in his tone, I can hear in his voice, I can hear in his inflection where he's coming from. And I can tell by the way he operates in black and white thinking, either it's this or it's that, or we have to do this or that, or these terms of never or always, where we make these over generalizations. All of that is oftentimes rooted in a fear-based response, meaning we're operating from a place of lack, what we're not going to be able to acquire, what we're going to lose. And I would venture to say a lot of times within the Pan-African community, there is this embedded fear that we have about what happens if we don't do, what happens if we succumb to, what happens if the community, if we don't, what happens to men if. So if we're operating out of that frame, we don't step back outside of that perspective to really consider what would it look like if I wasn't operating out of this fear-based response. So one of the things that has continued to happen to us is we've not analyzed and assessed the degree to which we form our ideologies and our belief systems and our values around fear. And I think a lot of the times when we have the conversations, if we were to really step back and to ask yourself, when you make these claims, when you say these things, when you hypothesize around what's gonna become of the community, what's gonna happen to Black men, what's gonna happen to Black women, if I were to ask you, Brandon, what is your ultimate fear? You would possibly be able to identify what that fear is. And then if I were to say, okay, Brandon, what would you think or what would you believe if that fear wasn't present? Then we can begin to have a different type of conversation, because you're not operating out of the base of your brain. When you operate out of the base of your brain, you don't fully allow yourself to process and reason from a place that gives you the fullness and scope of what's actually going on, because the process that's actually happening in your brain is survival. We're literally operating out of a place of survival, and what's going to happen to us if we get wiped off the face of the planet and Black people no longer exist. We can't continue to make decisions out of the survival part of our brains. We have to get to a higher level of thinking where we're making decisions out of a different part. So that's the point that I'm attempting to make here, is that if we don't learn how to stop operating out of the fear part of our brain, we'll continue to come to these same types of conclusions.
You know, I understand what you're saying, but if you look at that, the science of the psychology doesn't really support you, because when you look at an animal, we're just mammals at the end of the day. We think we have like a superior role in nature. We don't. If you look at an animal that is in survival mode, it does not behave like an African American. It doesn't. What we are in is we are in a coddled mode. We are in a mode where another group of people does so much for us that we have lost the capacity or the ability to actually operate in a self-preserving way.
When you say that, what's survival?
Let me say this. You're not in survival mode when you know that you could walk down the street to the county office and get a food stamp card, and God is going to make manna fall from heaven in the form of a electronic benefits transfer card, and you're going to get to eat every day without even working. You're not in survival mode if you know that if you got 5 kids, they're going to give you a check so you can go out and take care of those kids. Now, I will admit they have reduced the entitlement programs, but as they've reduced, they've also exacerbated the situation, because any person in America, think about it. I could go get on Section 8 right now. My little cousin, he's sitting next to me. He's 16. You know what I'm saying? His social worker told him, look, we could get you an apartment. You won't have to pay nothing for rent. You could just go to school, whatever. We don't live in that culture to where anyone's in survival mode, but we love to use that. We love to use that language because it garners sympathy. You can go to a county office in any state. My cousin Jayla, she has a mental illness. She travels from state to state. She moves from state to state like every couple months. It's really pathetic. But you know what she's always able to secure? A place to live and food to eat. Why? Because she says, I just go to the county building and they give me emergency homeless and they give me food stamps and they give me this and they give me that. So I don't know why we keep on saying we're in survival mode, because if we were in survival mode, our behavior will be totally different. A person in survival mode because they think the cops gonna kill them at a traffic stop is not gonna waste their time saying, why did you pull me over? A person who thinks that their life is under threat, if you ever watch one of them old movies, right? Like with the Germans and Nazis or something, when people got to checkpoints, what did they say? Why'd you pull me over? They didn't say nothing, because they knew that there was a very real chance that they would not make it out alive from that traffic stop. Black people are coddled in America. We are extremely entitled in America, and we are extremely egotistical. And to hide that, we try to hide that behind the victim mindset and this fake, we're in survival mode. No, we're not. I'm driving around in a freaking $70,000 car. If most people, even the drug dealer in your block, if that man wanted a $100,000 Mercedes and he really put his mind to it, he could do it. You know how I know? Because I watch drug dealers rolling down the street in $100,000 Mercedes. We are not in survival mode. We need to kill that narrative. We are coddled and egotistical, and we do not want to accept that we are actually it's not even a good position, but it's the coddle, it's the way that Europeans have set up this society, and they basically done everything for us to where we don't got to do nothing for ourselves, and that's what's really killing us.
So we're coddled and we're egotistical. So if Black people continue to be coddled and egotistical, what is your fear?
There is no fear, because the only thing the only threat to Black society in America is that we're gonna mix ourselves out. We're gonna be swirling. We're gonna be swirling. Black men love laying up with Mexicans and everything else like that. We're not. Oh, we're gonna go extinct. We're just gonna breed ourselves out. That's all we're gonna do.
We're gonna breed ourselves out, and then what will happen to Black people as we know it?
We'll just get blended into another people, and there'll be a new racial class.
Are you okay with that?
No, I'm not. That's why I'm moving to Africa.
Okay, so you don't want Black people to be created into this new racial class, and you think if we continue to go down the route that we're going, then that's going to lead to us becoming this new racial class.
On a personal level, I just want to reintegrate my bloodline back into the continent. What Black people choose to do in America, I want Black people to do whatever they want to do. And all the science, all the stats show that Black people in America want nothing more to be in lockstep combined with whites. That's the dream of Black people in America, to be white. Why do you think we put so much?
Real quick, Brandon. So you said the stats. What stats are you referring to?
The stats where Black people choose equality as the number one issue over everything, even things that would actually benefit us as a group. The only thing we want in America is to be equal with white people. That is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek comment, because in reality, it's not that we want to be equal with whites. We want to be white. That's what we really want. So what do we do?
Okay, hold on. Let Manika respond.
So what my point that I was making, you said that there is no fear, but it sounds like there's so much fear that you're willing to leave the United States and go to Africa because you don't perceive that Black people will be able to kind of get themselves together to the point to where we won't breed ourselves out. You might not identify that as fear, but when you say you're not operating out of a fear-based perspective, what's driving your decision making is survival. You're thinking about what's going to happen if Black people are no longer able to be in the world, and you've convinced yourself that because this is going to be the state and the nature that Black people are going to find themselves in, where we want to be white, then I'm going to remove myself from that situation and go where I know Black people are going to thrive and survive.
No, that's not true, because my decision to go to Africa has nothing to do with what's going on in America. I went to Africa. I absolutely love it there. I own 100 acres of land there. I have an apartment there. I said, ooh, it's like, for me, it's like being on vacation all the time. I love going to the beach, land on Diani Beach, Malindi Beach, all that stuff. It has nothing. I could live in America. I never complain about America. America's a nice place to live. Because as long as you're not
why did you mention about your decision when I asked what was the fear, and I said what would happen if you continue to stay in the United States? You mentioned that we would breed ourselves out, and you said that's why I'm going to Africa, because you were saying you were going because we were going to breed ourselves out.
No, I'm going to Africa because I want to reintegrate my own bloodline back. I just want to go back to where we came from. It has nothing to do. America in the next 100 years, America going to be a totally mixed population. It ain't gonna be no whites. It ain't gonna be no Mexicans. It's gonna be people totally mixed up, because we intermix with each other all the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, we look at that like that's horrible. It's not. But what I'm saying is, there's the place where that's not gonna happen is in Africa, because that's where we have the majority. I have a family here. I have a wife I've been married to for.
From a Pan-Africanist perspective, miscegenation is a sin from a Pan-Africanist perspective.
Yeah.
So just want to put that out there.
Right. I'm speaking as just from a secular perspective. Like in our world, there's no crime against that. I have a wife. She is a Black woman. I have a daughter with my wife. My daughter can go, her little boyfriend or whatever at school right now, he's Black and Asian. That's where we're going. You know what I'm saying? You can't tell no kid you can't marry him or be with him, because I'm like, dude, thank God he got a little bit of black in him.
I tell my kids that all the time. What you
I
talking
tell my
about?
kids that all the time too, but that don't mean they're gonna listen to us. You know what I'm saying? But you know, I do my due diligence as a father and everything, and teach my daughter to love her own people. My daughter's been to Africa a couple times, all that stuff. But the thing is, at the end of the day, Africa is the black stronghold, not North America. China is the Chinese stronghold, not North America. Europe is the European stronghold, not really even North America, because North America got so many mixed, so many different races here. Honestly, people like white people can do it. White people can't do shit in North America. It's too many different races, right? So no race has the monopoly in North America or South America, really. Mexicans or South Americans do over there. Wherever you got the numbers, that's where you got the power, period.
So
that's it.
I want to let Monica respond, and then I want to have Brother Michael Jordan tap in because he's been waiting patiently as well in queue.
No,
so
he
Sister
can
Monica,
go ahead.
and then
He can go ahead.
Brother Jordan.
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. We can
Yeah.
hear you just fine.
Okay, so to reiterate, what is the actual topic of the video? It has to do with the Freaknik, right? And
Yes, sir.
okay, so basically, like, as far as what I've been seeing from it and trying to understand how our people went from everything we went through to where we had our women on camera disrespecting themselves, dancing and doing all this other stuff. And I'm trying to correlate what Monica was saying as far as the trauma and the psychological issues and stuff like that. But to what Bakari said, 100 years ago, our women wasn't doing that stuff. And this is something that is, in a way, just a few decades old as far as our women acting this way. And, you know, not trying to take away from certain things, but either whether a man's involved or not, like I said in the comments, it's still a woman's choice to do these things. And I'm trying to understand how they can have these, how we went through all what we went through, and now all of a sudden our women are acting like this, and it's a psychological trauma for them, even though our people have went through slavery, our women came out of slavery and were as strong as they could be. And I think it's kind of disrespectful because our people went through so much during slavery and after slavery to where we at now, and it doesn't correlate with what you're saying as far as it being trauma, because we have had a lot of success throughout the decades just to come to this and see our women doing this recently, not the whole time. So I'm just trying to understand your point of view as far as why that's why you're blaming it on psychological trauma when first off, not all Black women do that. And once again, and I think it takes away the responsibility and accountability of what they're actually choosing to do. Because if we all share that same trauma, just for example, Brother Bakari was raised in a 2-parent household with his married biological parents, and he just admitted he was going to go rob a grocery store. He didn't have no reason or need to do that. He didn't face no trauma as a child growing up that I know of, but he still was going to make a conscious choice at 19 to go rob a grocery store.
Well, the trauma I faced was getting my butt whooped.
Yeah, like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Thank God you didn't do that, brother. But he wouldn't have had nobody else to blame but himself. And there wouldn't have been, in my personal opinion, I think he can admit, there wouldn't have been no psychological trauma that would have caused him to want to do it. He would have done it on his own merit, off his own choice. And what I've seen within the Black community and society in general is lack of accountability on women. It's always an excuse, and it's like I said, I'm not trying to make it no gender war. I'm not trying to battle against because you're a woman on that, because I know women that wouldn't do that. You see what I'm saying? I know men that would choose not to go to Freaknik and do those things. But when we're not helping our people, we're not showing love for our sisters, when we don't call them out on it and hold them responsible. If we want them to do better, we do have to say, yo, you wrong. We can't just say it's psychological trauma and then give them an out to why they do what they do. You know what I'm saying? I live here in Atlanta. I see sisters that sell their body all the time. They live their life like that. They don't have to. They choose to. They can get a job. They don't have to strip. If you can strip at night, you can get a 3rd shift job. That's always been my mindset. So I'm all about, as you're saying, we see it as black or white. sometimes it is just that. It's about just making the conscious choice to do the right thing. You might have certain issues, but you can still make, at the end of the day, it's still a black or white choice, whether you're going to do it or you won't. You know what I'm saying?
And if I can say this, I don't mean to cut you off, because I want to get to the comments in the chat, but and then give Sister Monica a chance to respond, because she wants all the smoke today, right? But I think there's a couple things that we can unpack from this conversation. One, I think men tend to, not always, you know, it's never 100%, but a lot of men tend to see the world in black and white.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's kind of the way we make our way through the world. The way we are able to handle things is from a black and white perspective.
Exactly.
And I think sisters, the women, the queen mothers, you know, the divine feminine tend to see things in a more nuanced perspective. I can say this because I grew up with my parents. I still see it with my mom and dad to this day. Right.
Brother Bakari.
Yes, sir.
But can I say this real quick? I gotta go, but I'm gonna give you a prime example. Today, I clocked in for work, right? I said, you know what? I don't feel like working. I want to go take my nephews to the movies. I chose to clock in and take my nephews to the movies on the clock. I know it's wrong. I chose to do that. Now, if my job fires me, which they won't, maybe they will, I don't know. But if they do, I can't holler racism. They did it because I'm black. My psychological trauma in my upbringing made me do it. No, it's a decision I chose to make under my own will, and that's it. Black people have been trained to blame other groups of people and unfortunate things that happen in their life for any and every bad decision they make. And it's just it's killing us. It really is.
And I appreciate that. We got to tap out. So I'm going to get to the chat real quick and then allow Sister Monica a chance to respond, because we may not be going for too much longer. But this is a great conversation. Media Baby states, are y'all talking about the women who were sexually assaulted? ? The same thing happened to women at Woodstock in 1999. When men chose to assault women, you can't blame the women. Agree 100% there. Media Baby, if you could, I would love for you to join the conversation. Link is in the chat. The True Blue 1992. I think men and women can have psychological trauma. However, some men choose to not acknowledge it. Sister Mary Shy, of course, said, excuse me, very true. And so I think there's a lot that we can unpack from here. And I think what you're saying, True Blue, is correct. However, I will make the argument that I have seen Black people use those type of excuses to what? Use those type of talking points to excuse their deviant behavior. We've all seen that before. I can admit, when I was in 4th grade, I got in trouble at school. And we all know what it meant growing up in the Black community back when we were coming up. If you get in trouble at school, your behind belongs to me, is what your parents are going to say. Ain't no way you get out of a whooping. So I concocted a story about how the devil was trying to make me be bad in school. So I remember I had this conversation with my dad. It's Friday evening, and it's like a movie night. On Friday evenings were movie nights. And so I'm like, I need to talk to you. And so I break down, start crying in the conversation. I was a thespian. I could have got a damn Oscar for that shit, right? And so, I was going to pull out the letter from the teacher and say, well, I got this letter from the teacher. I got in trouble. But I just knew my dad wouldn't believe that. I was like, he's not going to believe this. If I pull out the letter right after I tell him this whole story, but I believe the devil's trying to make me act bad at school. So guess what I did? I tore the letter up and threw it away. I went to school that Monday. The teacher said, did you give your parents a letter? I said, yes, I did. It kept on moving, right? So I think there are times where people will use those type of things to try to excuse bad behavior.
Yeah, well, that's a little different. So as human beings in general, we're always trying to move away from pain and to seek pleasure. So we do that as adults, we do that as children. So if you have the possibility of getting in trouble because we're always seeking to avoid pain, then that's the reason why we tend to lie or not tell the truth or to avoid certain things or situations, because we don't want the pain that comes along with that the consequences of that situation. So in that context, that's kind of what we do with human beings, just to kind of move away or towards those specific things. What we're talking about, and Michael specifically asked about how we got here in the conversation. So how we got here is we talked about the evolution of our society or evolution of our culture versus the devolution, where we regress, where we move backwards within our society. And we talked about the progress that we've made in certain areas of our culture, in the ways that we've regressed in parts of our culture. And it was acknowledged that in this, we talked about in the 60s and the 70s, you see this different form of liberation where women kind of identify with staying within the home, identifying with traditional cultural norms. But the reason why I don't think it would be a good idea, Michael, for you to be able to hold women accountable in these situations is because, again, the way that you choose to, just what Bakari said, the way that you choose to look at the situation, or the way that you associate that, is you believe that women need to be held accountable. So there's a book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. So if men are like waffles, that means men tend to compartmentalize. They don't tend to see the connection of things. If you think if this happened, then this happened, then this needs to happen. It's very black and white. It's 1, 2, 3. It's problem, consequence, and then that's the end of it. If you don't have the capacity to be like spaghetti, like a woman would think about it and perceive it, and we're talking about nuanced issues, people who understand the complexity of nuanced issues are oftentimes more in the position to be able to help people unpack the things that they're experiencing, because your level of capacity, not saying you, Michael, in general, but just men in general who have this compartmentalization where you don't see the connections in things. You guys think 1 + 1 = 2 when human
But doesn't
behavior
1 + 1 = 2?
1 + 1 can equal 1 or 3 as well.
1 +
But
1
that's what
=
you're
2. But
saying.
in the context of human behavior, when you're talking about the context of human behavior, there are so many other things that you have to consider. It's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2 when you're talking about human behavior. So if you say, well, you knew better and you shouldn't have done it, there's a lot of motivating factors that causes people to make the decisions that they make or not. And it's not making excuses for the person. So if someone makes a decision and your first mind is to say, oh, you're making an excuse, one, that's dismissive. It doesn't honor the reason why the person felt that they wanted to make the decision or needed to make the decision. 4, it causes the person to shut down, which doesn't help them feel vulnerable to share the reasons why they did it. So yeah, you could have this conversation about we need to hold people accountable, we need to hold women accountable, but the goal is to be able to create a space where women can feel comfortable sharing the reasons why they do what they do or why they don't. If they feel like you're constantly wagging your finger at them around what they should and shouldn't do and what choices they should and shouldn't make, and they knew better and they knew the choice that they were going to make, that's not opening up the conversation to have a real dialogue and a discourse, because you're not someone who's safe to share those reasons why they made the decision or not. So you might be right in what you believe and what you perceive, but you're not safe. And that's the reason why you see women not taking accountability for the things that they do, because they have to guard themselves from you emotionally, because you don't create a safe space for them to land when they do want to share something that they made a decision around. So you can't say you want to hold women accountable, but then it's like landing on a rock. If you want to be accountable, it has to feel more like landing on a pillow.
So
I don't mind.
Real quick, let me ask this question because I'm getting quite the education here. So with my children, right? I think there's been some times I've had them land on a rock, right? Right. So, but what I try to do is when they make a decision, I try to get to their mind. What were they thinking? So particularly with my son, he would do things. I'm like, okay, what were you thinking when this happened? And he would tell me what he was thinking, and I was like, okay, based on what you thought, you engaged in X behavior. How did that turn out for you? He was like, well, it didn't turn out well. I said, okay, so let's replay this. I'm Thanos. I got the time stone. We go back in time. The same thing happens now. How would you do this?
Yes.
So is that the way that you should do it?
Absolutely. So you're taking absolutely, because what you're doing is, if someone, like we said, people are going to make decisions to avoid pain and to move toward pleasure. So if your son did something wrong, or whatever he wasn't supposed to do, it was because he wanted something in that moment. Whatever he wanted, whatever you told him he couldn't have, what overtook his mind in that moment was him focusing on the thing that he wanted. He forgot all about what you told him not to do, what you told him not to touch. He only focused on what he wanted in that moment. So oftentimes when you ask a child, why did you do it? They'll either say, I don't know why I did it, or they'll give you the reason, because I wanted what I wanted at the time. So in that moment, when they're in that phase of doing what they want to do, oftentimes they're operating from a different part of the brain. Either it's in the survival brain or it's in the limbic brain. So the limbic part is our emotional center of the brain. So meaning I had a desire for something, I wanted it, so I went after it and I got it. When you ask him the question the way that you asked him, you take him from the limbic part of his brain to the executive part of his brain. So that's our prefrontal cortex. That's where our decision making, problem solving, thinking things through, making good choices comes into play. You all are wanting people to be in the prefrontal cortex in the executive part of the brain when the actions that they're taking are in the limbic part of the brain or the survival part of the brain, and you think that you can speak to the executive part of the brain when that part isn't online when people are making emotional decisions. So if you want to be able to move someone from the limbic brain to the executive brain, Bakari, what you did was you connected with him emotionally. You said, why did you do that? What was the outcome? Did that get you what you wanted? You helped him move from limbic, where he was in terms of making a decision based off of a want, and then you said you moved him to executive, where his decision making, problem solving comes in. Was that a good choice? Did that get you the result that you wanted? And now he's able to see, no, it didn't. He's able to take that step from limbic to executive because you provided him the space to make that jump and to make that leap. All I'm
And I
saying
love
is
that from Bible Pro, by the way.
that's perfect.
Yeah, but let me ask this, and I gotta open it up to Brother Jordan. And if you're watching, hit the like button, like, smash the like button. Make sure you hit the notification bell as well, and subscribe. And if you want to be part of the conversation, you can tap in. The link is in the chat as well as in the description. So you made a statement that one of the reasons why, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you said something about one of the reasons why women aren't holding themselves accountable is because we aren't creating a space for them to feel comfortable. And so that's a bit much for me to swallow. I would argue that I think that's hard to digest, to where
I just disagree
I'm
with
not
it.
holding myself accountable for my behavior. It's because of the environment around me.
Right.
Yeah. So what that means is a woman might not show her accountability to you, but when she's in a therapy session with me, she'll take accountability because I'm not judging her. And it might not be your place and your role to hold her accountable. She might need to be in a space with me that feels safe, where she can take accountability, where I can lead her in that problem solving, and whatever the thing that you guys are asking for, it would be my responsibility to help lead her to that decision, because I know how to create a safe space for her to make that decision. Now, when she comes out of a therapy session with me, then I have the capacity to say, okay, based off of what we talked about today, it sounds like you knew that wasn't the best decision to make. It sounds like you actually do want to make some different choices, but maybe you're afraid of the consequences, how people will perceive you. Maybe you're scared that you're not going to be able to maintain the changes that you actually want to make. Those are the motivating factors as to why people don't make change. It's not because they don't want to or because they don't have the capacity. It's oftentimes some type of fear that's motivating them to maintain the behavior. So if once we work through those fears, okay, well, if this fear doesn't exist, let's go practice it in the real world. I want you to try doing this one thing, try doing this differently and see what happens. And then come back to me and let me know how it felt. What did you notice? How were you perceived? What did you think about yourself? So I understand that you all want accountability, but the way that you're trying to get accountability for women, I don't think it's going to work.
Well, and if I could, and I want to let Brother Michael interject, I think I would speak for myself and some other men who are on here. And I what you're stating makes a lot of sense. But I think where the pushback will comes when you say women want to hold themselves accountable. And I would say that you've never been in a relationship with a woman. Right? So I mean,
Right.
I would say back, Bakari, you've never been in a therapy session with a woman.
I have.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have. In fact, my former therapist for the past 2 years was a Black woman.
No, I'm saying you've never led a therapy session with a woman.
Oh no, I have not. No, I have not.
So that would be the difference, where you would think from your perspective that women don't want to be held accountable. I know from my perspective that they actually do. It's just hard for them to, and it's a process to get there.
So let me ask you this question, and I'm sorry, Brother Jordan, but we're going to get you to tag in. But this is just because I'm learning. your professional opinion, do you think, I'm smiling because this is going to be a bit much, but do you think that it's harder for women to hold themselves accountable than men?
No.
Okay.
I think it's hard for both. If ego is involved, it depends on how big the ego is and what they stand to lose from holding on to that idea and that identity. I think that's the thing that makes the determining factor.
Okay. And the reason why I ask that question is there's a school of thought that the reason why we tend to find this type of behavior with women is because society coddles women and does not hold women to the same standard as men. And so that's why I asked that question. But Brother Jordan, you could go right ahead.
Yeah, because it seems like your explanation only applies to women and not men. And I'm trying to make sure that is that what you're saying? Because men, and like Bakari just said, which I was about to say, men in society, we get held accountable whether we want to or not. Women don't. I've seen a man can have 4 or 5 kids by 4 or 5 different women. They hold him accountable for that. But if it's a woman, they don't do the same thing. And once again, it seems just like another excuse for women to just do what they want to do, and not. And even on the other side, men have to hold on to that. And I don't see how that helps them. I understand what you're saying, but in the whole within the situation, I don't understand why it's a problem to tell somebody when they wrong, no matter how they take it, and they still have a choice. Men can't come out here and make a choice and then have a psychological, explanation on why they do the things that we don't get. That same thing. Society doesn't give us that. They really don't. They give it to women, and women support it, which is like I see like what you're doing now. I don't, and it sounds like it only applies to them. And that's what led us to where we at now, where women just do whatever they want, and it has to be some, code to get through to them. Which I'm learning this now. I don't ultimately agree with it. I feel like let me ask you this: would you ever go to Freaknik?
I did in high school, but now would I?
Why?
No.
Why did you go?
Well, we were excited about going. Like we to a Christian, we were in church and weren't really exposed to things, and the idea of going was exciting.
So it wasn't a psychological issue or any trauma. You just wanted to go for the experience.
Yes.
Right. So that might not apply to all women because you're saying some of them might have trauma that makes them do certain things and all that. But you kind of proved my point where you saying you just made that choice to go and you held yourself accountable for choosing to go just for you just wanted to experience it. The thing is, that's not hard for you to say. And what we see in this society is that our women are putting themselves in situations that doesn't benefit them, and we try to even if you try to tell them without even if it's clear to listen to them, some of them still will say, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Not only that, I've seen many of them make social media posts bragging about doing horse things to themselves and seeing support from other women in the comments. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't help them either. And that's something that we need to touch on, because if this is something that we're going to solve, accountability has to be made, but we also have to quit making excuses as well. And women have to start, if you feel like it's your place to do it, I guess you can find a better way than what you're saying men are doing. But the thing about it is, it's not, if it's not going to get us nowhere to where it's just going to keep getting worse, I don't really see the point of that route, because it's not helping. We still have black women having multiple kids by multiple men, children being raised in poverty, and yet we're not doing what we're supposed to as a community. That doesn't help them to make excuses, and so they do need to be held accountable.
So I'm assuming you think that women need to be held accountable based off of what you said. So if women were held accountable, what would that look like to you? What would be done to women?
Basically reprogramming their way of thinking due to what feminism has done to them, hope probably them being raised in single mother households and how they've seen that experience, what the social media platform has done to women as far as certain things that they do based on what they see other women do, not what a
So
man's
you
making them
want their
do.
minds to be reprogrammed, and
Because
that's what
that's kind of how it happened. Everything has a way of how they think and how they move. Our women didn't always do this.
I agree. So if women were to be reprogrammed, what would be the reprogramming program that you would propose?
Have
That's a good question.
most so having more self-respect for themselves, not over sexualizing
How?
themselves
I understand.
by
That would be a
promoting it.
part of the
Everything that
program.
they do is being promoted. All that Freaknik stuff and all that came out through the music. And like I said, whatever they experienced in the single mother households and stuff like that, without a father in the home, those are things that we got to come back to. The black
How do
community
we do
supports.
it? That's what I'm asking
I'm
you.
explaining
I'm
it.
asking how to do it.
I'm explaining. You keep interrupting. We gotta promote the 2-parent households, marriage, things like that. When women just basically stick to the man and not see him as an enemy, but still want to have kids with him, things like that. It's going to take a few generations, but it can be done. Like I said, our people weren't always like this, and there
I
was a
agree.
time when we had a high marriage rate. We didn't have baby mamas everywhere, baby daddies everywhere, and we have to reassert ourselves and promote the positive aspects of having a family, women not having multiple men, having multiple children with multiple men. These are things that can be done because that's how we literally lived our lives up until the 70s. You know what I'm
So
saying?
who would promote it? If you had this
Us, we can promote
reprogramming
it
program.
ourselves.
Okay,
We
so
can promote
what
it
role?
ourselves. We are black families. It's also has to be. We gotta fight. We gotta fight the music. It's us. We gotta be more vocal. The most vocal people are the ones that go along with the stuff that is negative. You know what I'm saying? And none of us speak up as much to counteract that.
Well,
I
think we do. I think we do.
I know we don't, because if it did, it wouldn't. I don't see it as you would see it more.
Well,
And you
think
really don't.
I think it's the television is so powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because it has a place of prestige in American society, and people believe that what they see on television is true and that it is real, and it is. Excuse me. An example, KJ, I appreciate you for tapping, sharing that super chat. This is what they should and can be, right? I remember I read an article many years ago that argued that Black people nowadays, what they saw on television is what they believe Black culture actually was, right? And so I think that's something that we have to discuss. But let me get to the comments very quickly. And Sister Love asks, if you want to tap in, you can, because I know you stated in the chat that you disagree with some of the things that were stated. But Bawana states, how is it that some women can practice accountability from 9 to 5 while they are on that man job, but when they get home, accountability goes out the window? So I guess that's a question for you, Sister Malika. And it seems like you're getting all the smoke today. but I know you're intellectually astute enough to where you can handle it. True Blue.
I'm not trying to give nobody no smoke. I'm just having dialogue.
I know.
Yeah, I don't think you are.
I don't even use that term. Yeah, nah.
The True Blue, being raised in a strict church environment can be considered a psychological contributing factor. Church didn't even allow instruments. I would agree with that. We know there's this issue of you kind of go buck wild when you leave your parents' home. I kind of did that a bit, so I can agree with that. It does play a role psychologically because it's almost like sensory overload, right? I never got to experience anything. Now I'm free. Woo! Right? We even see this in the Amish community, to where at 16 they're allowed to go out and experience the real world, and some of them turn away and never go back to the Amish community, right? So, and something I try to do with my children is let them experience what the real world is actually like, so that they aren't overcome by it when they leave the home, right? We see this a lot when we go to college. So this is a major issue. Once again, KJ, appreciate the super chat, feeding that YouTube algorithm for you. Blessings, appreciation. This is not a woman or man problem. This is about a society rooted in instant gratification. I would agree with that. I think that's a great point, that we're seeing this in society, this type of degenerate behavior on both sides, and it's something that's being promoted too. particular to Black people. I'll be giving an example that I'm gonna shut up. With Miley Cyrus, I think that's her name. When she switched from the Hannah Montana to the Miley Cyrus type of character, and she was like kind of being wild and ratchet and over sexual. And white news commentators and entertainment commentators say, what? She thinks she's Black. Right? So this is something to consider, that this is being marketed and promoted by non-Black people to Black people, that this is what it means to be Black. So something that we have to consider. And last but not least, Brother Bawano, we love this sister. She is awesome. She works well under pressure, and she is psychoanalyzed Brandon. So she must be good at her job, right? So everybody knows Brother Brandon. He's known for erring on the provocative side, and he's more conservative leaning when it comes to his Pan-Africanist views. But his love there. So let's tap back in. We probably could go for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes, and then we're gonna need to shut it down. And Brother Bawano, just to you, because you wanted me to keep you abreast of my doctoral journey. So tomorrow I'm going to be submitting chapters 2 and 3 of my dissertation, and then scheduling my my defense, right, for my dissertation. So the goal is to actually do the study during the summer, write the results in the fall, and be Dr. Lumumba by October 2023. So just wanted to make sure that you are aware of that, because you told me you wanted me to keep you abreast of what was going on. So, you know, as you always know, Brother Lumumba, that thing is always thinking. Anyway, so
can I ask a question of Brandon? I mean, I'm sorry, of Michael.
Yes, go right ahead, sister.
So I know you mentioned about you think we need to hold Black women accountable because they're having children out of wedlock, and the single parent statistic is increasing. So I'm curious, do you have a fear around that?
No, I don't fear nothing. I'm not here to be analyzed about it. Well, you ain't gonna do like you did Brandon or the other guy. I'm here to stay on the topic. We're not gonna do that with me. I saw what you was doing to him, and he fell for it. It ain't working on me. I'm not here for all that. I'm here for my people and to better my people. I don't have no problems that extend to me doing anything that would hurt my people or make excuses for them not to do better for themselves. My main thing is to see the issues within my community and try to give my best opinions and input to help them out. I want what's best for my brothers and my sisters and these children out here. So my thing is we gotta quit playing these games, and we gotta take our people seriously. So I don't need to be analyzed about anything.
Well, no, I just asked a question. What do you think will happen if we don't do that?
It's just going to get worse. We're going to see what we have now just get worse. I mean, look, you can look now. They trying to pass laws to where you can make if a young boy wants to be a girl at 13, they can do that. You know, the society itself is being attacked right now. But it's going to be it's always worse when it comes to our community. They always come at us first. They've always experiment with us first when it comes to these things. We have to we gotta be more assertive with these issues. We have to speak out more.
Do you think one of the reasons why we are susceptible to these type of experiments, if the physical experiment, even psychological or cultural, is because we haven't really honed down our own personal and cultural values?
Can you repeat that?
The reason I ask that question is because, as you know, working in higher education, it is an extremely multicultural environment. And when I've had conversations with people of color from other countries, they're like, we don't go for that at all. Like, what kind of stuff is that? So do you think that plays a role as to why Black people tend to be more susceptible to these type of cultural and psychological?
Yeah, a lot of things. If you look at it, if you really think about it, a lot of these things started once integration happened, and then the feminist movement and stuff like that. When we were on our own, when we were separate, we were going through things as far as the racist stuff, you know, but all that other stuff, we wasn't going for that. And you still got certain Black people that ain't going for that today. But yeah, you make a point. When we're trying to be too much of in their world and everything, that's when stuff goes wrong for us. We never needed to do that. I mean, dang, we were enslaved by these people. So integration really didn't make no sense anyway. And then the feminist movement was just, we had the Black Power movement. What did a woman need to be a feminist for? We fighting the same enemy, whether you with them or with the Black man. You was better off staying with us. You know, and that's what led to all the increase in the gang violence, the increase in the single motherhood, Freaknik, all this stuff. we really need to. That's what needs to be said. We need to separate. Because all the other cultures and they still kind of standing strong on certain things. When we integrated, that was the beginning of the downfall. It really was, and then feminism just exploded it,
Right.
and then it just went downhill from there.
Go ahead.
If we don't separate, I'm just curious, if we don't separate, do you fear that we will be extinct? Like Black people will no longer exist?
No.
Okay.
I don't fear none of that.
Okay.
So I know there's been a lot of conversation regarding integration, right? Most people make the argument, and I've made the argument myself, that integration took place at the intersection of three things. Right, intersection of the breakdown of the Black family structure, the breakdown of what Black community values, and then of course, last but not least, when we're talking about the intersection, do the integration, we're looking at the intersection of the breakdown of, golly, I can't remember the third. I'm so sorry. I said Black family structure, community values, and I can't remember the third. I apologize, but there are a number of things that took place during integration. That led, I would argue, to much of as a purveyor of many of the issues that we see today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some have argued that the battleship turned into a cruise ship, right? And so that they don't see the enemy anymore, right? The house is burning, as Dr. King stated, but they can't see that it's on fire. And oftentimes, unfortunately, as we know, because we're living in a vehemently anti-Black society, we are the ones who get burnt the worst. Right,
exactly.
When our comes out, it's not edible, right? As a result of us diving in and tapping into many of these issues, and I don't want to really speak ill of any community, but we've even seen in some communities where Black people have engaged in alternative lifestyles. Oftentimes, they're being drugged, they're being killed by white men that they're having these relationships with. We've even seen this with Black women who have divested and said, I'm going to be white men, and then they're being abused and have to do slave. There's all types of crazy stuff. So we know that even now in a so-called liberal society, open America, we're still catching hell, right? And so I would argue, and I would agree with Brother Michael, that we really do need to turn internally. I know I wrote an article in the Journal of Blacks in Higher Education and talking about how we need to close ranks and really turn inwards and focus on what we can do for each other, rather than looking for what society can and do, because we know, based on interest convergence, when them folks or their institutions tend to want to help you, in the long run, it actually benefits them and not us ourselves, right? And so a great example would be when Brother Bawana talked about this issue of being put on welfare, they're promoting these type of behaviors. Who benefits in the end? It isn't us. The outcomes for us typically are negative, while the benefit for them is what? The prison industrial complex, they got some workers, right, who are going to be entrapped by the carceral state. Oh, you got to get put on benefits? Cool, no problem. Now we the daddy, we're going to tell you what you can and can't do with your kids, so on and so forth. So there's a lot that when we really look at what's taking place from the surface level to even getting deep into the weeds isn't beneficial to us. And I think as a Pan-Africanist, and we know that we believe that what is done for African people should be done by African people, the only solution that we truly have is to close ranks and look internally to solve our own problems. I truly believe that. And
I agree.
We should do that based on our own cultural values. On our own cultural values. So when I have conversations, because I used to work in student conduct, and I would ask young ladies, okay, you're engaging in this behavior, it's your right, you're an adult, you can do whatever the hell you want, right? Who the hell am I to tell you what you can and can't do? But let's look at the outcomes. Is this actually benefiting you? Right? You're sitting here talking to me, you're about to be put on probation, right? You're one step to being suspended or expelled, right? And so really trying to unpack and get people to think beyond, I think in what you would say, Sister Malika, beyond the emotional, beyond the surface level, to think long term. We know most young people don't tend to do that.
Right.
So just things to consider. Just we talked about a lot here, about accountability, women accountability, Freaknik, so on and so forth. But I think this is important because there's oftentimes a lot of pushback that when men make the argument that they want women to be held accountable, it's rooted in patriarchy, and most people, I would argue, mistakenly associate patriarchy with misogyny. right? That's oftentimes, particularly in the feminist discourse, feminist literature, that if a man is patriarchal, he actually has a hatred or severe adverse view of women, and I don't think that is the case.
I don't think that is the case either, but I do question and wonder why men put so much focus on, like in this conversation, why men put so much focus on women being accountable. Like, why is that the linchpin? And part of what I heard Michael say is because Black men are held accountable by society, and men kind of can't get away with the same thing that women get away with in society. And I would disagree with that, because I don't think men are held accountable by society. I think Black men are punished
they
by
are.
society. I think
They-
it's a difference
Wait. I want, and let's give her a chance to explain the difference between being
Okay.
punished and held accountable.
I think it's a difference between being punished by society, which you guys are always punished by society. I don't think you're held accountable by society. When you hold someone, let's just think about the reason why Brandon, I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep calling you Brandon. I'm sorry, Michael. The reason why you might want to hold me accountable is because you have my best interest at heart, because you want the community to grow. You want the community to thrive. You don't want to hold me accountable. My hope is, if we're working together as a community, you want to hold me accountable so that we both can be successful, so that we both can win, so that our families can win, so that our children can win. It's a mutually beneficial reason why you want to hold me accountable. When you all are punished by society, it's not a mutual beneficial reason why society punishes you for the things that you do or don't do, for paying child support and not paying child support. Society does not want Black men to be on an equal tier or equal playing field with white men. So it's not that you all are held accountable for the things that you do. You're punished for the things that you don't. So I don't think that we could say that society is holding it. I think we could perceive it as being held accountable, meaning there's a consequence for an action. I would say that is the correlation between what happens for you. If something happens to you, you don't get to not pay, or you don't get to not do the thing that you're being forced to do. But again, who's winning? Who's benefiting in this situation? It's always a top-down situation, never one where it's benefiting the Black man to come up and to be successful in society. So I don't see those two things as the same.
That's a great point. I hadn't looked at it like that. Okay, you cooking tonight, sister. You cooking tonight. Cooking. Okay, very good.
So you say society also doesn't want Black men on the same level as Black women either, and they put things, and Black women support that, and they're actually vocal about that as well. And even with that being said, that's another thing that Black men are fighting too. We're fighting our own women to bring them back to the Black family dynamic, and they're against it. You see what I'm saying? They like I said, they will rather be alone with multiple kids by multiple men than be married. And that's sad. And it's not, whatever we got to deal with, it still hurts them. But there's, like I said, they choose to do it. And that goes back to the account. We might get punished. Yeah, but that's worse than being held accountable. And they can't even do that. So that's the thing. We're being punished and we got to take it. We want y'all to be held accountable, and it's pushback. And so even with that, what we have to do is we just going, like I said, we're gonna have to just keep fighting against the issues. And I heard everything, a few things that you said, and like I said, I can't really grasp it all, because it's like I said, it's giving women an out, because I don't know if you base your psychological things off also towards men as you do women. If it's fair for Black women to have these issues, is it fair for Black men to have those issues as well, and hold them not, saying, should we stop holding Black men accountable a certain way? Or I'm saying? I want to help my people. I want them all to do better. And it's not just accountability. It's also, we can also start by helping them do better by focusing on the younger generation, by making sure they don't put themselves in positions that a lot of our people are going through now.
Yes.
That's another thing too. But the only way we'll do that is if we do hold these mothers and our people accountable now, specifically the single mothers who are raising these children, who we don't know what they're going through in these single parent households. and they end up going around in the same circle that their mother did, and their mother did, and their mother did. So
And that's why I don't think I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, you can continue.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
No, you were saying that's why you don't think.
I lost my thought when you interrupted. You good?
Oh, sorry about that.
So I'm gonna say this, and this is something I've struggled with, because even though I would agree much with what the brother was saying and what Brandon was saying when it comes to holding women accountable, I've struggled with it with my daughter. You know, you tend to just be softer with girls. And I remember there was a situation, my son did something like a week earlier. I got on him, sent him to his room for an hour. A week later, my daughter did the same thing. I didn't say a word. And he was like, hold up, stop. No. She did the same thing I did last week, and you didn't say anything. She didn't go to her where I was just like, and I remember my daughter, y'all know Zion, and she would just sit there. And I was like, I put my head down and said, you know what, you're absolutely right. It is hypocritical for me to hold you accountable for something. And then when she does the same thing, for me not to say anything. So I think it's almost natural for us to kind of do that. You know what I mean? I mean, he was like, and he was demonstrative, like, no, she got to go to a room for an hour just like I did. So it happens. It does. It really does. And so I think part of this is just how society and people view women as softer, demure in nature, this Victorian idea of femininity, to where women really can do no wrong. At least many of us would hope that would be the case, right? The woman's being seen as the moral compass of the family, typically because she's the first teacher of culture to the child. So I think there's a lot that goes into why this tends to be the case.
Yeah, but I
always give the example of people talk about, holding women accountable. We all know that the movie Why Did I Get Married To, where Marcus' character like straightens his wife out and the baby mom, right? And people like, say, that's what you got to do. And I said, that's not realistic. I said, if you do that in real life, one of those women gonna call the police on you. That's what would happen in real life. If you raise your voice at a woman, one of those two women would have called the police on his ass. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? I'm calling white guy. Yeah, right. So I think there's a lot to unpack. What I would argue is what the best thing that we could do is try to associate with like-minded people. That way we don't have to involve ourselves or engage with the riffraff. So I think that's one thing that we can do. And I think when we get older, we tend to do that. We tend to know how to stay out of the fray, right? And people that I think who are older, our age, right, and getting into those type of things because that's what they're into, right? And so I think that's something to consider as well. But final thoughts, and then we're going to close out because it's getting it's about 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. So final thoughts from, of course, Sister Monica, Brother Michael, then we will close out.
Michael can go since I cut him off when he was trying to finish his thought.
I lost it. You go ahead. I still didn't know what I was going to say. I mean, it's cool.
Well,
you go ahead.
It's closing thoughts, so you can kind of just
give
your.
You can go.
No, it's okay. You can go.
I will provide a closing thought, right? And then you two can figure that out. But I would argue, I think we had a great conversation. I think there was a lot that we were able to unpack and really dig into the details here, stemming from the surface level, which of course is the Freaknik, to how men and women see the world, move in the world, right? And seek to manipulate the environments that we are even in, right? Great book that Sister Monica pointed out. And of course, we promote literacy here at Lumumba Speaks, and that is men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti, understanding and delighting in your differences. So if you want to check that book out, okay, that's the homework for the week, right? Check out Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti. I would agree that I think men do compartmentalize. I think this is why we're able to go out and battle in the world and even fight in wars and then come home and have tea with our daughters, right? Because of the ability to compartmentalize, right? And I think most of us do that on a daily basis. We are able to go out into society, into a society that I think I would argue is vehemently anti-Black and hostile to Black interests, Black progress, and even more importantly, Black lives, but yet be able to be productive, be successful, be competitive, and then come home to our homes and our partners that I would hope is our sanctuary, and of course be able to decompress and be loving and caring and nurturing. So I think we all practice compartmentalizing on a base level, but I think more so, man, like I said, we view the world more so from a black and white perspective rather than from a, of course, more of a fluid perspective or a gray perspective. And that's why I think growing up, we tend to, Brother Michael can speak to this because he grew up with both his parents. Your dad say, hey, you ain't doing X, Y, Z, you just don't do it. Right? There is no conversation. Yep. Okay, well, maybe this, that, and the third. It's like, you heard what I said, boy. And so I think that's where that comes from. But with that being said, I'm going to let Brother Michael, I'm going to let you give your final thoughts, and then we'll close out with Sister Monica.
It was a great dialogue for what I saw and was able to attend in. Like I said, my main thing is better for our people, men, women, and children, and doing what we got to do the best way possible to see ourselves better in every situation across the board. That's it.
Thank you. So what I'll say in closing is related to the topic. I do think that it's important for us to continue to expand the conversation about not only where we are as a people, but the things that we tolerate within our community, who's able to tell our stories, and what type of barriers do we have in place within our communities, or what types of institutions do we have within our community that can allow or disallow stories to be told that aren't in the betterment for the culture and for the community. So Bakari, I know you mentioned about a couple lawsuits that were coming out because of this, but if this is something where we needed to and wanted to take a cultural stance against the release of the film, because it would be detrimental to the culture, I would love to see us get to a place to where we had the power and the money, the infrastructure to be able to use this conversation as a sounding board to really resonate on a louder platform, to where if we didn't want it released, that we had the power to be able to do that. So I know our goal here is to not just have the conversation, but to talk about how can we to expand it out and to utilize that to continue to grow our power, and for that to ultimately benefit the community. So I think we're all on the same page. I think the way that we get there differs. I know we're not ideologically always going to agree on how we get there, but the goal is that we're coming up with solutions that can at least point us in the direction of where we all ultimately want to go.
Absolutely. And very quickly, and that's been done before. Many of you may be aware of the rapper Shorty Low. He's transitioned, but he wanted to come out with a reality TV show entitled All My Baby Mamas. And he had 10 baby mamas. And the community came out and said, no, we are not going to allow this to be disseminated for public consumption because this makes us look bad as a people. So we know that there is a contemporary historical precedent to what you're speaking to. And Sister Shai asked the question, hello, is this sister a psychologist, therapist, or counselor? And the answer is absolutely yes. This is Sister Monica Thomas, the woman, the myth, the legend, the Afrocentric social worker. And if you could, Sister Monica, share with the everyone here and in the chat who's watching your contact information and how people could get in contact with you.
So I do have a YouTube channel, but primarily I make content for social workers and therapists to help deepen their level of self-awareness and to increase their competence and confidence in the profession of social work. So that would be as social workers, as therapists working in the field. So if anyone was interested in following my YouTube channel, it would specifically be for social workers and other therapists and helping professionals. But it'll be under my name, Monica Thomas.
Right. And so you have an Instagram as well as a YouTube channel.
Yes.
Right? And you also have your private practice. And what is the name of your private practice?
The private practice is Kindred Connections Therapy Center, and I primarily work with African-American children, youth, and families impacted by trauma. So whenever I speak, that is the perspective that I know the most about. I know that's where we struggle the most, and I know that's the point of our greatest vulnerability. So if you all hear me ask the question about fear, it's not that I'm psychologically analyzing anyone, I'm providing a perspective around what part of your brain do we operate from. You can look that up on Google to find out when we make certain decisions, or when we are having a certain perspective, or when we ask certain questions. If we're operating out a certain part of the brain, you can tell by the types of questions that we're asking. You can tell by the types of things that we're concerned with. So if I say, what is your fear? And you say you don't have any fears, now that's where I began to psychoanalyze in my own mind and say, I'm not too sure about that. Because if you're concerned about LGBTQ, if you're concerned about single mothers, if you're concerned about the things that are happening for Black women, but then have no concern about what that will mean for us in the long term, in terms of our genocide, or whether or not we'll be in existence, it would be hard for me to believe that LGBTQ issues are a concern for you, but procreation isn't a concern, and then ultimately the decline of the Black family is also not a concern. So I just wanted to have an honest conversation about that. It's not that I'm trying to, get people to bait people, but when I say have a higher level conversation, that's what I mean. We have to begin moving beyond the surface to saying all these things that we think are going to happen, and really get to the reason why we're concerned around those things happening, and how that is leading us to the conclusions that we're coming to, how it's leading our conversation, and how it's leading the concerns that we have as a culture.
Very good, very good. And so Sister Shy says she just subscribed to your channel, so thumbs up
thank
there,
you.
right? And so like I said, I think this is a great conversation, and one of the things we try to do is move the conversation forward. But diversity of thought is welcome here. So I'm never going to tell someone, if you have a dissenting opinion, you're not welcome. This isn't the way I rock. That's not the way I party, right? I think this was a great conversation. We're going to be doing this every Sunday at least, and make sure that you all tap in Friday evening, where I'm going to be doing a preview and prediction show for the big fight coming up this coming Saturday between Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Kingley Garcia. We know this is the first super fight of 2023. And as you all know, I'm going to be always betting on Black. Until next time, make sure you subscribe, like, and share. You've been watching Lumumba Speaks here on YouTube. Peace.